Chapter 76. Natsu. Hal called out his name in shock, but Natsu was completely unmoved. There was only a burning will to fight in his eyes, which was the violent power after the fusion of fire and earth. Natsu, who became a lava dragon, was no longer the slightly immature dragon slayer before. He absorbed part of Hal's magic power and finally awakened the power of the dragon. Lava Dragon's Claw Attack. Natsu's voice shook the sky, accompanied by his suddenly swung lava dragon claws. The air was filled with a burning breath, and the hot lava rushed towards Hal with violent power. Hal quickly condensed the power of the earth, waved his staff, and a solid stone wall instantly rose from the ground under his feet. However, Natsu's power was far beyond expectations. The lava dragon claws chopped down heavily, the stone wall was instantly melted, the earth cracked under the huge impact, and Hal was actually knocked back several steps. Hal's eyes gradually turned from shock to calm, but his heart was filled with unprecedented expectations. Natsu, very good, Hal secretly praised in his heart. Natsu launched another attack, Lava Dragon's Collapse Fist. The lava scales on his body emitted a blazing light, and his palms instantly became extremely hot, sweeping towards Hal with boiling lava. Hal condensed magic power and turned the power of the earth into a solid barrier in front of him. Hal waved his staff again, summoning a solid earth barrier. However, the power of the lava easily tore through his defenses like magma eroding the earth, and Hal had to retreat quickly, trying to stabilize his body. But Natsu's attack did not stop at all. Natsu raised his hands high, then swung them violently, and the magma-like flames fell from the sky, hitting Hal like a meteor shower. Lava Dragon's Meteoric Sky Attack. Hal immediately activated the magic power of the Earth Dragon and summoned a larger rock barrier to resist, but the heat of the magma easily penetrated these barriers, making Hal feel unbearable heat. "It's really my Earth Dragon's power," Hal said in his heart, calmly analyzing the situation. Natsu was standing on the earth at this moment, absorbing the power in the earth veins continuously. He was no longer a simple fire dragon slayer wizard, but had the characteristics of an earth dragon, recovering magic and physical strength every moment. Natsu fought more and more bravely. He didn't feel tired at all. The power in his body seemed endless. Every attack was powerful enough to destroy everything, and he pushed Hal back. The power of the lava dragon and the fire were perfectly combined, making Natsu's attack not only extremely destructive, but also shocking enough to make the earth tremble. The battle between the two became increasingly intense, and the small cave was completely unable to withstand the battle between the two dragon slayers. Swoosh! The two entangled in the lava and bombarded each other, rising continuously until they reached the sky above the Sirius Island. In the camp, Makarov had come here to rest, drinking ice lemon and enjoying himself. With Hal and 5 other S-class mages here, he felt very relieved now. It would be great if Miston Gang was still there, he thought with a little pity. Suddenly he felt the hot magic in the sky. "Is it Natsu and Hal?" Makarov spit out the ice lemon water he had just drunk in one gulp, and looked at the sky in shock. At the same time, Lily, who also stayed in the camp, and Happy in the cave were also watching this scene in shock. The two fought fiercely in the sky above Tenro Island, and their powers were constantly stirring, and the air around them was distorted by the high temperature. Every attack of Lava Dragon Natsu brought the fusion power of hot flames and lava, forming a powerful shock wave that swept everything around. And Hal relied on his unfathomable magic power to play steadily, and every defense and counterattack seemed particularly calm. Around them, the air seemed to be burned by flames, and the breath of lava filled the entire battlefield. Every time Natsu launched a fierce offensive, the entire Tenro Island seemed to be shaking. Between the huge flames, the sky seemed to be torn apart, and the air was full of scorching breath. And Hal's earth power made him stand like a mountain, his magic was steady and heavy, resisting every wave of violent attacks from Natsu. Natsu has now completely integrated into the power of the lava dragon, and the violent flames and the power of the earth are combined in his body. Hal remained calm. He knew that this was a good opportunity for Natsu to become stronger, and he must thoroughly test Natsu's limits. The collision between the two in the air became more and more intense. Natsu's attack continued like a storm, while Hal remained as steady as a rock. He kept adjusting his defense and counterattack to ensure that he would not be suppressed by Natsu's lava power. Although he was forced back several times, Hal's eyes were still there was no panic. Just when the battle between the two reached its peak, Natsu suddenly concentrated all the lava power in his body into his hands, roaring and launching the most violent attack at Hal. The Doomsday of the Lava Dragon. The power of Natsu's hands slowly covered his whole body, and at this moment all his magic power was concentrated in this attack. No, this attack. Hal looked at the figure wrapped in lava in the sky with some surprise, and his red lava-like pupils burst out with a strong obsession. Natsu, you kid, do you want to prove yourself so much? At this moment, Natsu endured a lot of magic invasion, but still rushed over regardless of everything. Hal made a quick decision, and the golden magic power burst out instantly, and the dazzling light swept the entire sky like stars. Dozens of lightsabers emerged around him, emitting unparalleled sacred pressure, as if the whole world was trembling. The pure and flawless light that illuminates the world descends from the sky to judge all evil. Light magic holy sword judgment. His voice was cold and sacred, and then he waved his hand suddenly, and dozens of lightsabers shot towards Natsu like meteors, surrounding him accurately and powerfully. Each lightsaber was like a chain, firmly blocking Natsu's movements and completely blocking his way. Although Natsu tried his best to break free from the invisible prison, his strength was exhausted and he could no longer continue to fight against the vast light. Trapped in the cage of the lightsaber, Natsu's lava dragon power was gradually suppressed by the holy light, and the power of the earth dragon was completely isolated. He struggled, and the unyielding flame was still burning in his eyes, but the flame eventually extinguished as the magic power dissipated. Hal was suspended in the air, looking down at Natsu, with both helplessness and deep pampering in his eyes. He slowly withdrew his magic power, and the lightsaber gradually dissipated like morning mist and disappeared into the air. That's it, Natsu. He said softly, his voice calm and firm, you have passed. With Hal's announcement, the battle finally ended. The breath of the lava dragon gradually dissipated, and Natsu returned to his original appearance, exhausted, panting and kneeling on the ground. He looked up at Hal, with a relieved smile on his face. Finally. I finally got your approval, Harney-chan. He murmured, and as soon as he finished speaking, he completely lost consciousness and fell to the ground. Seeing this, the little cat Habi rushed over quickly, with tears in his eyes, and called out eagerly, Natsu! Natsu! Hal looked at Habi gently and comforted him, don't worry, Habi, Natsu is fine. He's just exhausted. After that, Habi walked to Natsu and gently carried him on his back. With the movement of his palm, a faint green vitality emerged in his hands, flowing into Natsu's body like a entangled vine, repairing the violent earth dragon power in his body. Hal felt the power still raging in Natsu's body, and couldn't help but whispered distressfully, really, you little brat, you still like to mess around so much. He carried Natsu steadily on his back, while muttering softly, with helplessness and concern in his tone. Natsu lay on Hal's back, although he was unconscious, but there was still a satisfied smile on his face. When did I not recognize you, little brat? Hal muttered to himself, with both blame and concern in his tone. Although they are not brothers by blood, the 8 years of acquaintance and 8 years of companionship are better than real brothers. Hal carried Natsu on his back, his steps were steady and slow, but he couldn't help but feel a little dazed in his heart. He looked at Natsu lying on his back, and memories flooded into his heart like a tide. It's been 8 years. In the blink of an eye, you have grown up, Natsu. Hal sighed silently in his heart. Chapter 77. On the other side, Laxus stood in the cave, closed his eyes, and carefully sensed the magic fluctuations around him. Is this magic, from Natsu and Hal? Laxus muttered to himself, with a slight smile on his face. Ha ha ha, it seems that Natsu's potential has finally exploded. Hal, you are not really defeated, are you? Laxus chuckled and shook his head. At this moment, he heard the slight footsteps coming from the cave. Are you here? 2 figures not far away gradually appeared. They were Gray and Loki, who arrived 1 step later than Natsu. When the 2 saw Laxus standing tall, their faces instantly became solemn. Tisk, it's Laxus. Gray frowned when he saw this. Loki also said helplessly, it's terrible. With the strength of the 2 of us, it's probably difficult to defeat Laxus. No way, we have to go up anyway. Gray waved his hand without hesitation, and his clothes disappeared instantly, and his whole body was condensed with ice-blue cold magic. He stared at Laxus coldly, ready to attack. Laxus looked at Gray's changes, a trace of seriousness flashed in his eyes, shook the black cloak behind him, and took a posture of being ready for battle. Oh? Interesting. He said lightly. Loki, cover me. Gray shouted, with a fighting spirit in his tone. Understood. Loki responded and flew out, his whole body wrapped in golden magic, shouting loudly, "Lion glory!" He quickly approached Laxus and quickly drew a huge golden lion-shaped magic circle in the air, and then a dazzling light suddenly burst out and rushed straight towards Laxus. Seeing this, Laxus raised his hand reflexively and blocked his eyes to block the dazzling light. "Now! Grey!" Loki shouted. "Ice make big hammer!" Grey reacted very quickly, and a huge ice hammer condensed in the air in an instant, and slammed down on Laxus' head from the air. Boom! A huge impact erupted instantly, and dust and smoke filled the cave, completely blocking Grey and Loki's vision. Grey showed a smug smile and bumped fists with Loki, "Perfect cooperation, partner." Loki panted slightly, but he did not let down his guard. "Don't be too proud too early, Grey. Laxus will not be defeated so easily." Boom! Another huge lightning column exploded in the dust, and Laxus was wrapped in huge thunder, and he was unharmed. He said with approval, "That move just now was not bad." "No, Loki, be careful." Grey realized the danger and hurriedly reminded. However, before he finished speaking, Laxus' body had turned into a dazzling flash of lightning, approaching Loki at an elusive speed. The lightning flashed, and before Loki could react, he was hit hard by lightning. He flew backwards like a kite with a broken string, fell heavily to the ground, and his whole body was paralyzed by the current, unable to move. "Loki!" Grey shouted anxiously. Laxus looked at the fallen Loki coldly, put away the thunder in his hand, and said coldly, "Loki, your magic power is still too weak. Go back and let Lucy work hard." Loki struggled painfully for a while, barely showing a bitter smile, and finally turned into a golden light and returned to the star spirit world. "It's incredible." "Sorry, Grey." Grey witnessed all this, and the pressure in his heart doubled. He knew that the next step was a contest between him and Laxus. "No matter what, I can't retreat." Grey gritted his teeth, and the ice-blue coldness of his body became stronger and stronger. He formed seals with his hands, and a thick layer of ice instantly formed on the ground, and the cold air quickly spread. "Ice make icicles." Countless icicles emerged from the ground and suddenly attacked Laxus. Laxus snorted coldly, and his body turned into lightning again, shuttling between the icicles, easily avoiding all attacks. "Grey, I like your ice-shaping magic very much. I have always had very good skills, but unfortunately, it is useless to me," Laxus said coldly. He was as fast as lightning and appeared in front of Grey in an instant. Lightning burst out from his fist and hit Grey's abdomen fiercely. Thunder Dragon's collapse fist. The powerful electric current directly knocked Grey away. Grey rolled in the air and fell heavily to the ground. He covered his abdomen in pain and tried to stand up, but found that his body was no longer obedient. "You have done very well, but the gap in strength cannot be ignored." Laxus approached calmly and looked down at Grey, who was unable to move. Grey gritted his teeth, enduring the severe pain in his body. He fell to the ground helplessly, gasping for breath. "Laxus, you are really too strong. But I can't stop here. As you are Yu's apprentice, as the glory of the Ice Wizard." "Laxus! Keep going, our battle is not over yet." Grey stood up firmly, looking at Laxus with burning eyes, and a strong ice magic burst out from his body. Laxus looked at Grey's firm eyes and frowned slightly, knowing that the victory is already decided. "You still want to continue?" He snorted coldly, but a hint of appreciation flashed in his eyes. Grey did not respond. He just took a deep breath, and the ice-blue magic in his body continued to surge, and a thick layer of frost instantly formed on the ground under his feet. The temperature in the air dropped suddenly, and the surrounding rock walls were quickly covered with frost. Grey made seals with his hands, and the cold air around him continued to gather. "Ice make ice blade dance." Countless ice blades attacked Laxus like a storm, each ice blade flashing with cold light, cutting through the air and pointing directly at Laxus's vital points. Laxus snorted coldly, clenched his fists suddenly, and thunder burst out from his body. "Lightning!" He instantly turned into a flash of lightning, and his figure flashing with the power of thunder shuttled between the ice blades, constantly dodging Grey's attack. The ice blade was shattered by his thunder, and turned into countless fragments and scattered, but Laxus still couldn't touch Grey at all. Grey took the opportunity to distance himself and formed a seal again. "Ice make ice wall." A huge ice wall stood up in front of him, trying to block Laxus's attack. A trace of disdain flashed in Laxus' eyes, and the thunder gathered in his hands again, Thunder Dragon Jaw. He smashed his fists hard at the ice wall, and the power of thunder instantly shattered the ice wall, and ice chips flew everywhere. But at the moment when the ice chips scattered, Grey was ready for the next step. Ice make ice cage. The ice chips condensed into countless ice pillars, quickly forming an ice cage around Laxus, trapping him in it. Laxus frowned, and lightning burst out again, directly shattering the ice cage. But Grey did not stop, his hands became more and more stable, and the ice blue magic power continued to condense in his hands. Ice make Lancer. Several ice spears shot out from all directions at Laxus, with a cold and sharp aura, pointing directly at Laxus. Laxus roared, and thunder surged wildly in his body, and a strong electric light burst out instantly. Thunder Dragon's Collapse Fist. He swung his fists out suddenly, and two strong electric currents penetrated all the ice spears, shattering them all, and even shattering Grey's body. However, that was just an ice substitute, and Grey had already moved to the other side, avoiding the frontal impact of the thunder. He formed a seal again, and the magic of ice condensed again. The magic condensed rapidly, and the cold air formed a white mist visible to the naked eye in the air. He stared coldly at Laxus, who was repelled, and his hands were tightly clenched in the air. Ice make ice cannon. He roared, and a huge ice cannon appeared in front of him. Then a vast avalanche-like force gushed out from the cannon mouth and swept towards Laxus. Laxus did not expect Grey to be able to release such a powerful magic. He was forced back by this avalanche-like force, and the whole person crashed into the wall behind him, making a deafening roar. Ice and snow flew up, and Laxus' figure was covered by thick ice and snow. But Grey obviously didn't want to give Laxus any chance to breathe. He gritted his teeth, gathered the last bit of magic power again, raised his hands above his head, and the magic power gathered into an ice bow, and an ice arrow flashing with cold light appeared on the bowstring. Ice make super freezing ice arrow. He pulled the bow with all his strength and released this powerful ice arrow, which drew a cold arc of light in the air and pointed directly at Laxus. However, just when the ice arrow was about to hit, Laxus' figure suddenly disappeared, turned into a golden lightning, and quickly passed through the attack range of the ice arrow. Grey's eyes flashed with a trace of astonishment, and before he even reacted, Laxus' figure had already appeared in front of him. There were still a few strands of ice and snow on Laxus' body, but that did not affect the thunderous pressure he exuded at all. He slowly extended his frosty hand, patted Grey's shoulder, and a faint smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Well done, Grey. Grey was panting, his magic power was almost exhausted, and his legs were a little weak, but the tenacity and determination in his eyes, the heart still has not dissipated. Laxus looked at Grey, and his smile was more approving. I declare, Grey, you have passed this test, you have become stronger. Hearing this, Grey's tense body finally relaxed, and a smile rose at the corner of his mouth. Although he was almost exhausted, an indescribable sense of satisfaction surged in his heart. He looked at Laxus's eyes of approval, as if all his efforts were rewarded, and then fell heavily to the ground. Seeing this, Laxus took off his black cloak with some helplessness, and carried Grey on his back like Hal and walked towards the camp outside the cave. My family are all amazing guys, Hal, old man. Laxus sighed softly, with a tone of pride and warmth that was difficult to conceal. Chapter 78. Deep in Urza's cave, the air was tense. Juvia and Lysina held their breath, facing the White Knight Urza, who was facing a formidable enemy. Tianlong Dizzy Sword. Urza waved the sword in her hand, and countless magic swords instantly appeared in the air, sweeping towards Juvia and Lysina with a sharp aura. Meow. Lysina quickly transformed into a white tiger, flexibly dodging the swords stabbing at her one after another, her footsteps as light as the wind. Juvia stood still, calmly watching the magic swords rushing from all directions, as if she was not afraid of these deadly attacks. It's useless, Juvia is a rain girl. As soon as the voice fell, the sharp sword pierced her body, but it only penetrated the water flow. Juvia's body had already turned into invisible water mist, unscathed. A hint of surprise flashed in Urza's eyes. She retracted her sword and looked at Juvia calmly. It's rare to see you take things other than grace so seriously, Juvia. Urza's armor changed back to her usual combat outfit the moment she landed, and she stood in front of Juvia. However, Juvia's aquablue magic suddenly surged, and it seemed that even the atmosphere of the entire cave became damp and oppressive, and fine water droplets oozed from the rock wall. Mr. Hal's power once frightened me, until I met Grey-sama, I made up my mind. For him, I must become stronger and not let threats like that day approach again. Juvia's eyes flashed with determination, recalling the moment that made her heart surge. Urza was silent for a moment, and another familiar figure emerged in her mind, the former Jalal. Her eyes gradually focused, and a hint of fighting spirit appeared on her face, the power of love. Very good, Juvia, let me see your power. Change clothes. Sea King armor. In an instant, Urza's body flashed with green light. Her Sea King armor could invalidate water magic, making her unaffected by Juvia's attack. And the sword in her hand also turned ice green, symbolizing absolute restraint on water magic. Back off, Lysina, leave this battle to me and Juvia. Urza looked resolute. Although Lysina was worried, she still said firmly, no, Sister Juvia, I won't let you face it alone. Animal Soul Mermaid. Lysina turned into a mermaid, with a graceful figure like a water elf, swimming beside Juvia. Juvia nodded slightly, and her fighting spirit ignited in her heart. Thank you, Lysina. She slowly raised her hands, and the magic power condensed in her hands. The water flowed from the depths of the cave with overwhelming force, swallowing the entire cave like a flood. The abyss of water pours down and turns into endless darkness. Water flow, abyss. The cave was filled with turbulent water, and Juvia's figure merged into the water, becoming the incarnation of water. She swam in the water and attacked Urza lightly and swiftly. Lysina also turned into a mermaid and followed closely behind. The water flow seemed to turn into a battlefield, surrounding Urza. Although Urza was restricted by the environment, she remained calm. As expected of Juvia, this water flow is rich in magic, and even my Sea King armor is a bit difficult. She waved the long sword in her hand lightly to block the incoming water flow, but Juvia and Lysina's attacks followed one after another. Water flow cuts. Juvia controlled several high-speed water blades and went straight to Urza. The sword in Urza's hand turned into water flow, lightly cutting through those water blades, and calmly responding to each attack. Lysina also suddenly appeared from the water, waving a water whip and attacking Urza's armor. Urza swam faster, relying on the powerful defense of the armor, and quickly dodged their continuous attacks in the water. Juvia was unwilling to give up easily, and she cast magic again, water flow rising. A strong water column rose from Urza's feet, trying to rush her to the surface of the water. Urza's eyes were sharp, and her body swam swiftly in the water, cleverly avoiding the attack. Her sword light attacked Juvia like a storm. Although Juvia used the water flow to build a barrier, she was still repelled by the powerful impact. Sword of the Sea King. The sword in Urza's hand changed from an ordinary magic sword to a water sword formed entirely by water flow. The thin blade easily cut through the attack of the water whip. She rushed down from the water, staring at Juvia, and then used the sword of the Sea King. Sea King's sword, water slash. Urza shouted softly. Countless water slashes attacked Juvia again like a storm. Juvia tried to use her water flow as a barrier to resist, but was still hit and could not avoid it. She was knocked out of the water and knelt on the water, looking at Urza wearing the Sea King's armor with some difficulty. As expected of Miss Urza, this kind of magic and armor that restrains me so much. Juvia was a little distressed. Despite this, Juvia still stood tenaciously, with an unyielding expression on her face. Her whole body was bathed in the water, always maintaining a trace of calmness and determination. I can't give up. For Grey Sama, I must not fall. A trace of admiration appeared on Urza's face. After so many days of getting along, she knew Juvia's persistence and determination. A good fight, Juvia. Your strength has surpassed your previous self. You are worthy of being called Juvia of the Sea. But as long as it is a fight, I can't lose. Urza waved the ice sword in her hand, and a sharp sword light crossed the water. Juvia felt that she was close to her limit, but her eyes still flashed with a firm light. Water stream clear shield. Juvia tried to defend against this attack. Juvia tried to resist, but still couldn't resist Urza's powerful strength, and was finally hit and fell in the water. As Juvia fell, the water gradually dissipated and the cave returned to calm. Her whole body was soaked in the cold water, and the waters transformed by magic also lost their source of power and slowly flowed out of the cave. Urza took off her clothes, approached Juvia, stretched out her hand to help her up, and said with a respectful tone, "You did a good job, Juvia. Your efforts and determination have changed my impression of you, and I believe you will get what you want. This time, I declare that you have passed the test." The cooperation in the waters was great. If it weren't for my Sea King's armor and Sea King's sword that restrained you too much, the outcome would be unknown. Yet, Lysina turned into a white tiger beast soul and hugged Juvia happily. Juvia, I really passed the test, I'm so happy, Grey-sama. Did you see it? Juvia hugged Lysina and kept thinking about Grey. When Lysina heard this, her joyful face couldn't help but show helplessness and jealousy. She knew that Juvia was truly infatuated with Grey, but Grey never took the initiative to respond, so she couldn't help but feel a little resentful towards him. Chapter 79. Sister. In another cave, Elfman was helpless. Myra, who was standing in front of him, smiled gently, making him feel uncomfortable. Ah, it's Elfman, Myra smiled gently, but her eyes flashed with dangerous light. Sister will test your strength well. Elfman felt the familiar and terrifying breath, and couldn't help trembling all over. He didn't dare to make a move for a while. He had countless images of being suppressed by Myra in his mind, and his feet seemed to be nailed down and couldn't move. Alba, who was standing behind him, had a puzzled look in her eyes. Seeing that Elfman had not moved for a long time, she couldn't help but step forward and said coldly. Elfman, what are you doing? Don't think that we can show mercy just because she is your sister. She had no idea that Myra's magic power had been restored. Ever since before the Laxus civil war, Alba and the Thunder Gods had been on missions outside for a long time, and her impression of Myra was still that of the sister who lost her magic power because of Lysina's loss. In Alba's eyes, although Myra was once an S-class wizard, she is now just a vase that looks good but has no combat power. This impression has been deeply rooted. Wait, Alba, don't be impulsive. Elfman wanted to stop her, his voice full of urgency. However, Myra smiled lightly, with a hint of evil in her eyes. Really? Since you don't believe it, let me show you, receiving the soul of Satan with the whole body. As soon as the voice fell, Myra's figure suddenly changed, and the black devil wings spread out from behind her, and the air around her seemed to become cold and oppressive in an instant. Her gentle smile disappeared, replaced by a creepy majesty and horror. At that moment, Alba was stunned. The Myra in front of her was completely different from the weak vase in her memory. Alba stopped immediately, with a trace of astonishment in her eyes. This is the soul of Satan? How is it possible? At this moment, Myra standing in front of her was so powerful, as if she was facing Laxus, and she couldn't help but feel a chill in her heart. Alba, be careful. Elfman was about to remind Alba to be careful, but Myra's action was as fast as lightning. Dark-Tide Alba only heard the chilling cold voice, and did not make any move. The Dark Tide instantly attacked Alba, and the powerful dark claws knocked her out before she could react. Alba's body was thrown heavily against the wall of the cave like a kite with a broken string, hitting a deep dent and dust flying. Alba! Elfman exclaimed, seeing his partner being hit so hard, a strong desire to fight ignited in his heart. He forcibly suppressed the fear in his heart, clenched his fists, and walked towards Myra step by step. Sister! I will defeat you! Elfman shouted this sentence loudly, his eyes full of determination and unyielding. He knew that he was far behind Myra in power, but for Alba, he could not back down. Myra heard Elfman's challenge, smiled coldly, and a dark light flashed in her eyes. Oh? Really, Elfman? Do you think you have a chance? Myra in the state of Satan's soul is completely different from her gentle self. Her voice is cold and ruthless, like a whisper from hell. Elfman gritted his teeth and decided to do his best. He raised his arms and his whole body began to undergo tremendous changes. Accept the soul of the Beast King with your whole body. His body was covered with bulging muscles and hair, like a ferocious beast, and his strength instantly increased to the extreme. However, even such a powerful Beast King soul still looked so small in front of Myra. Myra's hands quickly gathered endless dark energy in the air, and there was no mercy in her cold eyes. Super sadistic flash. The dark light blasted out like a cannonball, and Elfman was swallowed by this powerful force in an instant, completely unable to resist. The light swept through, blasting him out of the cave and falling heavily on the beach. Elfman's body lay weakly on the beach, the surrounding waves gently slapped his body, and his consciousness gradually blurred. The assessment was also declared over at this moment. In the cave, Myra retracted her power, and the dark aura around her gradually dissipated, returning to her original appearance. A smile flashed across her lips, looking at the direction where Elfman fainted, secretly thinking that she had controlled her strength well. If Hal was here, he would definitely touch Myra's head and say to her, "The strength is just right, it's not a big deal. As for the reason why Elfman was so afraid of Myra at the beginning, it was just that Myra severely ravaged her brother after recovering her magic power, test his own strength. Elfman still can't forget that battle. 2 years of silence brought more terrifying and violent magic, and the demon Myra became stronger. On the other side, Gildarts was looking at Lucy and Kana in front of him with a headache. Kana, your dad seems to be a little distressed, Lucy pushed Kana's arm and whispered. Hey, don't worry about that stinky dad, we have to move forward, Kana wanted to stimulate Gildarts and ignored him. So, Kana and Lucy walked forward as if they didn't see anything, and Gildarts became more and more entangled. Finally, when the two were about to pass Gildarts, Gildarts spoke. Stop, I haven't said you are qualified yet. The terrifying white magic pressed down instantly, and even with only 30% of Gildarts' magic pressure, Kana and Lucy felt their breath choked. Damn Gildarts, you're finally going to make a move, right, you stinky Yaji. Seeing this, Kana finally couldn't help it, and she threw out a string of magic cards in an instant. The cards flew in the air, bursting out their own unique magic. Fate of Summoning Thunder. Several lightning bolts shot out from the cards, heading straight for Gildarts. The lightning tore through the air, making a harsh thunderous sound. Gildarts just waved his hand lightly, and the lightning dissipated in the air in front of him, as if it had never existed. Sun's explosion. Kana immediately issued it, and the flame card turned into a fire snake and pounced on Gildarts, and the scorching temperature distorted the surrounding air. Gildarts frowned and easily dissolved the flames again, as if this was just a slight disturbance to him. Icicle of the God of Death. The frost card flashed a cold light and rushed straight to Gildarts with an extremely cold breath. However, Gildarts remained motionless. With a wave of his hand, the icicle shattered instantly and turned into ice chips scattered all over the ground. Damn it! Kana was a little helpless when she saw this. She burst out with more powerful magic power, ready to let her father know her level as a wizard. At this moment, Lucy stood up, and the key in her hand shone with golden light. Open, the door of Scorpion. With Lucy's call, a hip-hop style cool star spirit scorpion appeared on the battlefield. His huge scorpion tail was raised high, and he quickly fired a sand laser cannon, heading straight for Gildarts. Yo, let me help! Scorpion shouted confidently, and the sand laser cannon drew a dazzling arc in the air with a powerful impact. Gildarts felt the power of the laser cannon, and a hint of surprise appeared on his face. He slightly turned sideways to avoid the frontal attack, but the impact of the sand still raised a huge dust around him, temporarily interfering with his vision. Good job, Lucy! Seeing this, Kana immediately increased the intensity of the attack and threw a few cards again. Fountain of Prayer. Kana shouted, and the card flew out, instantly turning into countless water whips around Gildarts, spreading radially outward with the card as the center point. The water whips carried a strong impact, like a violent wave, and took advantage of the cover of the sand and dust to hit Gildarts violently. This time Gildarts frowned slightly, facing Kana's serious attack, he finally decided not to dodge. His whole body was instantly covered with powerful magic, and the moment the water whip touched him, it seemed to hit an invisible wall, and all of it was bounced back and splashed in all directions. Kana, your magic has improved, and your magic power has become stronger. Gildarts said calmly, with a trace of relief in his eyes. Kana did not relax at all, and then threw out another card. Ice Pillar of Death. Same move. Gildarts frowned. You are careless, stinky dad. In just a moment, the icy breath swept around, and the card turned into a huge ice blue cold current, condensed into a huge ice pillar, and stabbed towards Gildarts at a high speed. What is this? Gildarts looked at this magic in shock, with a little seriousness on his face. Crush! Gildarts' hand burst out a strong white light and confronted the ice pillar. The ice pillar instantly turned into shatters and dissipated in the air. Enough, Kana! Gildarts' voice was soft, and his pressure dissipated instantly. Kana and Lucy, who were standing in place, felt that the burden on their hearts disappeared instantly. Kana panted, and the card in her hand was still trembling slightly. She knew that she still couldn't do it. Gildarts smiled at his daughter and said, Nice card magic, Kana. You can now use one card to cast. You have done a great job in casting such a powerful compound magic. Then, he turned to the somewhat bewildered Lucy on the right and said slowly, You have passed. Let's go. Kana clenched the card in her hand, her face full of unwillingness. She stared at Gildarts angrily, thinking that he was feeling sorry for her again and wanted to give her a backdoor. How is it possible? We have almost no combat results. Kaina couldn't help complaining, her tone full of confusion and loss. Gildarts looked at her with a gentle smile on his face. He slowly said, I said you passed, and you passed, Kaina. Kaina still looked at Gildarts in confusion, waiting for his explanation. Your magic is excellent, Gildarts continued, his tone became gentle and full of affirmation. It's a pity that my magic has absolute restraint on you. You can't even use any trap magic and compound magic, because you know that as long as you stop attacking for a moment, you will be defeated by me. Gildarts paused, looked deeply at Kaina, and said with a hint of pride, but because of this, you have shown excellent combat awareness and high-quality performance as a wizard. If it is a battle between wizards of the same level, you can defeat anyone. Gildarts took a deep breath, and said in a gentle but firm tone, This is what I, Gildarts, said, keep getting stronger, my daughter. Kana felt a sour feeling in her heart when she heard this, and tears almost burst out of her eyes. She immediately raised her head, pretended to be strong and gritted her teeth and said, Damn oh you Yaji, you wait. Let's go, Lucy. Oh. Lucy was still immersed in Gildarts' words just now, and was suddenly pulled away by Kaina. She was a little unprepared and hurried to keep up with her. The two gradually moved away from the cave. On the way, Lucy looked at Kaina with a smile on her face and said with emotion, It's great, Kaina. Tisk, what's good about it, that stinky Ou Yaji, all the talk is crooked. Kaina responded stubbornly, trying to hide her inner touch. Really? Lucy smiled lightly and said nothing more. The voices of the two gradually faded away, and Gildarts stood there, stroking his stubbled face. Muttered to himself a little at a loss, I just performed well, Kaina, are you angry with my image? Damn it, it's all because of that stinky boy Hal, who didn't have time to clean himself up these 2 days. Chapter 80. It was still a cave on one side, but this time it was a fighting cave, with a magic restraint that only one team could pass through. Gajeel protected Levi in front of him, constantly resisting the attacks of Bigusro babies in the sky. On the ground, Fried kept waving his sword to force Gajeel's figure. Damn it, there was another round of sword and iron clashes, and Gajeel retreated with some teeth gritted. How can the thunder gods be so strong? Gajeel seemed a little incredible. Hee hee ha ha ha, Gajeel, it's a pity that we didn't take action when you were still a ghost. Bigusro stood in the air and said with ease. Be careful, Gajeel, Laxus's thunder gods are really strong, especially the Captain Fried, who was called the S-level in the guild by Urza, Levi reminded on the side. At this moment, Fried stood with a sword, with his green long hair in the shape of lightning fluttering, obviously not using his full strength. Hee hee, ha ha ha, you don't even need Fried to do anything in this state, I can handle you by myself. Line formation. Bigusro commanded the soul dolls to form a straight line. Ah! Do you think I've done my best? Gajeel dodged, and then Gajeel's iron magic burst out. His skin quickly turned into hard steel, and the scales of an iron dragon gradually appeared on his body. Gajeel showed a confident smile and rushed towards Bigusro's soul dolls. Do you think such a small thing can stop me? Look, what is a real iron dragon? Gajeel roared, stomped his feet hard, and the ground shook. His arm instantly transformed into a huge iron rod. Iron Dragon Rod. Gajeel's arm swept out like a whirlwind, and the powerful force smashed the soul dolls to pieces, and Bigusro was also shocked back. Bigusro looked at Gajeel's changes in surprise, obviously not expecting him to burst out with such a powerful force. Iron Dragon Spear. Gajeel didn't give Bigusro a chance to react, and quickly transformed his right leg into a spear, pointing it directly at Bigusro. His movements were as fast as lightning, and the spear drew a silver arc in the air, piercing directly into Bigusro's abdomen. How is it possible? Bigusro's face changed drastically, and it was too late to dodge. Gajeel's iron dragon spear was accurate and fierce, instantly hitting Bigusro's body, nailing him hard to the wall of the cave, and shaking the surroundings of the cave slightly. Ha ha ha! You really underestimated me, Bigusro. Gajeel laughed, obviously proud of his previous attack. Damn! Bigusro barely stood up, with an unwilling look on his face, and was about to attack again. At this moment, Fried finally spoke. He walked forward slowly, with a look of cold admiration and a hint of sarcasm. You are worthy of being the Iron Dragon of the former Phantom, Gajeel. Hearing this, Gajil's expression changed instantly, and he stopped smiling, with a look of loneliness. Shut up, Fried. Gajil is already our companion. Rebecca retorted angrily, with dissatisfaction in her eyes. Be quiet, little guy. Gajil's tone was full of pampering and confidence. You just need to stand behind me and watch me defeat him quietly. Ah, you are really. Rebecca was a little helpless after hearing this, but there was a look of worry on her face. Gajil turned his head to look at Fried, with a strong fighting spirit in his eyes. Oh? Are you finally going to take action yourself? Yes, I heard that you and Natsu were in a close fight at that time. Fried said calmly, with a barely perceptible light flashing in his eyes. His figure was gradually shrouded in dense darkness, and he entered the spell darkness mode. At this moment, Fried's momentum suddenly increased, as if the air in the entire cave had solidified. Come on, let me see your strength, the so-called Iron Dragon. Fried's voice was low and powerful, with endless coldness in his eyes. Obviously, he had not forgotten Gajil's crime of attacking the guild. Begusro, don't make a move, I'm enough. Fried did not hide his contempt for Gajil. As his voice fell, his body gradually turned into a dark form like a demon, and the long sword in his hand flashed an ominous black light. Just what I want. Gajil did not show any weakness and rushed up immediately. Gajil's iron dragon scales shone with a cold metallic luster. He rushed towards Fried without hesitation, and his iron fist hit Fried with heavy force. The two people's strength clashed in the air, making a deafening noise. Fried sneered and quickly he took a few steps back to avoid Gajil's attack, and his long sword drew a dark arc in the air. Dark words, severe pain. He whispered a spell, and flashing words appeared on the long sword, and then slashed at Gajil. Gajil tried to block the attack, but the dark words on the long sword instantly penetrated into his body, and an unbearable pain came over him. He groaned, and his body involuntarily took a few steps back, and cold sweat oozed from his forehead. Damn ritual magic! Gajil gritted his teeth, holding back the pain, and his body instantly turned into iron, trying to resist the erosion of the dark words. Iron Dragon Steel Fist. Gajil roared and swung a heavy punch, his fist covered with heavy iron scales, and hit Fried's chest with overwhelming force. Fried had a blank expression on his face, spread his wings, and quickly flew up to avoid Gajil's attack, then he circled in the air, and the long sword swung out a dark sword light again. Juiying. His body instantly turned into a dark shadow, quickly approaching Gajil and attacking from behind. Gajil sensed the threat from behind and turned around quickly, but Fried was too fast, and the dark sword light cut a deep scar on his back. Gajil groaned, blood flowed from the wound, but his eyes ignited a stronger fighting spirit. Gajil. Libby looked at the side anxiously, but she couldn't make a move. She understood that this was Gajil's chance to prove himself to his guild companions. Is that the extent of it? Humph, I don't know where you got the courage to come and provoke our guild at that time, Fried mocked lightly. You haven't won yet. Gajil growled, his arm quickly transformed into a spear, and stabbed at Fried fiercely. A cold light flashed in Fried's eyes, and the long sword in his hand attacked again. Dark breath. He swung the long sword suddenly, and a dark vortex gushed out from the sword tip, hitting Gajil's spear directly. The two forces collided in the air, darkness and steel clashed fiercely, and the air around them seemed to be torn apart. Gajil's iron dragon spear was slightly at a disadvantage under the impact of the dark vortex, but he refused to give up, gritted his teeth, and pushed forward with all his strength. Iron Dragon Spear Ghost Firewood. Gajil roared, turned his spear suddenly, and quickly fired several sharp spear shadows, each of which was heavy with iron power, crushing Fried's dark vortex point by point. Fried retreated calmly, and his hands quickly gathered dark magic power, preparing to launch a stronger attack. Dark Light Bullet. He roared, and a huge dark light bullet condensed between his hands, blasting towards Gajil with the power to destroy everything. A trace of determination flashed in Gajil's eyes. He did not retreat, but rushed towards the light bullet. The iron scales on his body began to flash a more dazzling metallic light. The roar of the Iron Dragon. Gajil opened his mouth and spit out a whirlwind of silver iron sheets, which collided head-on with Fried's dark light bullet. The huge explosion sounded throughout the cave, and the shock wave cracked the surrounding stone walls into countless cracks, and stones kept falling. The figures of Gajil and Fried were shrouded in the smoke and dust of the explosion, making it difficult to see clearly. When the smoke and dust gradually dissipated, Gajil's figure was already shaky, and the iron dragon scales on his body were eroded by the power of darkness and shattered, and blood flowed from multiple wounds. And Fried still stood steadily. Although his robes were a little damaged, his cold eyes still flashed with the light of victory. "You are strong, Gajeel, but this still cannot change the crime of you trying to attack Levi and others. Do you think you are done pretending to be a good person now?" Fried said with a cold expression but an excited voice. The long sword in his hand swung out again, and a dark sword light hit Gajeel's chest, knocking him to the ground completely. Gajeel fell heavily to the ground, his consciousness gradually blurred, and the power of darkness seemed to devour his last bit of strength. "This is the end you deserve, the Iron Dragon of the former Phantom." Fried whispered, put away the long sword, and stared coldly at Gajeel's falling figure. "Gajeel!" Levi couldn't hold it back anymore, tears burst out of her eyes, and condensed magic with her right hand, trying to block Fried forward. "Stop! Little guy, you stay behind. I haven't lost yet." Gajeel's voice was hoarse but firm. Although he was shaky, he still stood up. "Hey!" Fried looked at Gajeel's body, which was already full of scars, with some surprise. "Your body has no chance of winning, stupid guy. I know. If Mr. Hal hadn't appeared in time, I might really have put the person standing in front of me. The little guy behind him was beaten up as an enemy. At that time, I was that kind of scum. I know very well how hateful I was." Gajeel laughed at himself, but a determined light ignited in his eyes. "But, Fried, I am no longer the Iron Dragon of Spectre. Now I am the Iron Dragon of Fairy Tale." Gajeel growled, and deeper magic power surged in his body. The strong green light made his Iron Dragon scale shine. "How is it possible? With such injuries, you can still release such powerful magic power?" Fried looked at Gajeel in astonishment, his face changed slightly. "Infernal Devil! Iron Dragon Sword!" Gajeel's right hand suddenly condensed a giant sword shining with a cold green light, and with fierce power, it swept towards Fried fiercely. Fried had never thought that Gajeel still had the strength to fight back. The next moment, his body was hit by a dragon, and he was hit hard and fell to the ground. Gajeel looked at the fallen Fried, barely raised a bitter smile, and then he could no longer hold on, his legs softened, and he lost consciousness. In this battle, Gajeel broke the prejudice that enveloped him with his fearless determination. After an unknown amount of time, Gajeel woke up slowly on Levi's legs, and what came into view was the broken cave battlefield around him. Fried and Begusro had long disappeared, leaving only silence. "Gajeel!" Levi saw him wake up and immediately hugged his head tightly, tears kept falling from her cheeks and dripping on Gajeel's face. "Little guy, I told you, you just need to stand quietly behind me." Seeing this, Gajeel smiled weakly, but his voice gradually became low. "Asshole! Why are you so messy? If everyone doesn't like you, you can slowly integrate into the world, why are you so extreme?" Levi couldn't help but scolded with tears in her voice, tears kept flowing. I'm an asshole, I don't know how to make others like me." Gajeel spoke with difficulty, his tone full of helplessness and regret. His thoughts couldn't help but return to that night, on the streets of Magnolia. Hal's cold eyes were like a sharp blade, deeply piercing his heart. Levi looked at him, tears blurred her vision, but her voice was unusually firm. "You big asshole. I like you." Her voice echoed in the cave, with a strong sense of true love and uncontrollable emotional catharsis. Chapter 81. Inside the guild camp, Hal had just come to the side of the guild leader Makarov with Natsu on his back. In the evening, the light of the bonfire shone on Makarov's face. He had put away the cynical smile he had when he came to the island, and sat quietly on the stone, staring at the flames with deep eyes. "This brat, he's starting to make trouble again." Makarov's voice was low and a little tired. "Ah, Natsu is like this, it's always been like this." Hal responded softly. After hearing this, Makarov first laughed, and his laughter seemed a little lonely in the silent camp. He looked at Natsu, whose dragon scales had not yet completely faded, and a complex emotion flashed in his eyes. "Hal, I'm glad you're here. I can feel more at ease now." Makarov's voice suddenly lowered, with a helpless frankness. "Old man, I'm actually a little scared, afraid that I can't protect you kids." Hal was silent for a moment, a little interrupted by Makarov's sudden voice. At this moment, Laxus also walked into the camp carrying Grey on his back. The light of the campfire reflected on his cold face, softening it a little. "Yo, They're all here. Laxus' voice was with his usual confidence and casualness. What's Grey like? Makarov looked at the unconscious Grey on Laxus' back with some surprise. These guys have been working hard recently. It's just an exam, but they're so excited. Although Laxus was a little helpless, he raised a smile at the corner of his mouth. Makarov listened, the light in his eyes dimmed again, and his expression looked even more lonely. Old man, what are you thinking about? Laxus noticed Makarov's mood and asked softly. The camp was silent, with only the slight jumping sound of the bonfire burning echoing in the calm jungle. Anyway, old man, we are here with you. Laxus took a step closer, his tone was rare and gentle. It's time to change your old habit of sighing from time to time. Makarov looked at this grandson who was once rebellious and refused to communicate with him with some surprise, and his heart was full of mixed feelings. I have also thought a lot recently. Laxus continued, with a thoughtful firmness in his tone. As for the guild, it doesn't matter if it's not so powerful, as long as I have enough power to protect the guild. That sounds like what you said, Laxus. Hal saw this and responded with a smile. He also felt that the big brother of the guild had changed a lot recently. Makarov listened to the two people's words, and the heavy burden in his heart seemed to be slightly relieved. He sighed, and a trace of relief appeared in his expression. Well, with you here, I may really be relieved. After this exam, I will retreat behind the scenes. Are you going to resign as the president? Hal asked with some surprise. It's time to enjoy my old age. Makarov's tone was relaxed, but his eyes flashed with an unnoticeable firm determination. Laxus was silent for a moment, and finally said softly, well, you should have a good rest. It's not right to fool around with us young people every day. After a while, Urza came over with Juvia and Lysina. Perfectly completed the task, President. Urza seemed confident. You little girl, did you overdo it again? I just felt a strong fluctuation of magic power. Makarov looked at the red-haired girl in front of him helplessly. President. Why did you suddenly start calling me by my childhood nickname? Are you feeling unwell again recently? Urza didn't notice Makarov's reproach, but stepped forward with some worry. Okay, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. I'm just afraid that you're a bit immature to be the examiner because you don't care about anything when fighting with others. Makarov said helplessly. President. How could that be possible? Urza looked away. Puff. Hal couldn't help laughing at this, and helped Urza out of trouble. It's okay, Urza has been like this since she was a child. Laxus also came over with a smile. Embarrassing Urza was a little shy when she saw this. She, who always believed in her strength, now acted like a little girl. Lysina, who was standing by, also went to prepare lunch on her own. Juvia looked at Grey, who had fallen asleep, with a worried look on her face. Laxus nodded to her, and she felt relieved. Soon after, Kana, Lucy, and Gildarts returned, and Myra also brought Elfman and Alba rushed back. Finally, it was Wendy and Mest. Although they arrived on the island last, they were lucky and passed directly. Mest hid his teleportation magic. Fried, Gajil and the other four also returned to the camp. It is worth mentioning that Fried and Bigusro helped Gajil back all the way, and Levi followed behind with a happy smile on her face, which made everyone curious. Seeing that everyone had arrived, Makarov slowly stood up from the stone. He glanced at the people around him with a little relief in his eyes. Although I didn't go directly to the exam site, after this exam, I can clearly feel that everyone's magic power has been significantly improved, especially Natsu. Everyone did a great job. According to the exam regulations, our second exam will start tomorrow. Now, those who are injured will go to Hal. Those who are not injured, go collect ingredients for me and start our long-lost outdoor camping in Fairy Tale. Makarov announced loudly. Hal had a question mark on his face when he heard this. I forgot to tell you, before you came back from the capital, the president had already told everyone that Hal was here for this exam, so we didn't have to hold back. Myra took the initiative to explain. Good fellow, how could I not know that? Laxus was also confused. No wonder everyone is so excited, Laxus complained. Okay. Hal was a little helpless. Afterwards, all the guys who took the exam except Wendy and Levi came to Hal to line up for healing, and Wendy was also helping. It is worth mentioning that Mester had a mouth injury. He swallowed a hornet's nest on the way, and his mouth was horrible, which made Hal shake his head. Natsu was lying with Gray on the side, and Lucy didn't know when she sat next to Natsu. Hal looked envious for a while, and also cast his eyes on Myra, who was cooking with Lysina on the side, with a little pity in his eyes. "Stop playing around and work hard," Laxus slapped Hal on the head. "Oh, your injury will heal after a good sleep." Hal was awakened by the slap and looked at the frost marks on Laxus' body. "Work," Laxus ignored him and spoke without hesitation. In this exam, Natsu undoubtedly improved the most, followed by Gajeel. Natsu, who swallowed Hal's magic, has almost completely integrated the magic of the Earth Dragon. Now he is not only invincible, but also has a critical hit. As for Gajeel, from Hal's perspective as a Dragon Slayer, he has also entered the stage of high percentage fusion of Dragon Slayer magic and body. If nothing unexpected happens, this guy should not be able to provoke Natsu on a vehicle, he will definitely faint. Looking at Gajeel, who is still smiling happily, Hal said in his heart. Speaking of which, I don't know why Gajeel is so outrageous. His magic is obviously very strong, but his strength is not as good as Natsu. If we use the Phantom's criteria, he is also an S-class wizard, but it is incredible that he has not developed the weakness of a standard Dragon Slayer wizard until now. That night, 7 or 8 cabins appeared around the camp, and everyone chose their own positions and moved in. It is worth mentioning that the S-class were all in tents outside, and the president said that sleeping too soundly will make you lose your vigilance. This is what the president said. So the president asked Hal to build a huge cabin and brought the best bed and bedding to live in. Looking at Hal and Laxus, the corners of his mouth twitched. This old man is really so lonely during the day, and at night he returns to his old and frivolous appearance. Laxus sat by the campfire, silently holding a branch, looking at the flames in front of him and said slowly. "Yes, the president grandpa is really ridiculous." Hal echoed. "By the way, where's Gildarts?" "He went to Kana's cabin, and was kicked out by Kana. Now he is in a lost state in the tent. This uncle is outrageous." Hal complained, holding his forehead. "Haha, it's okay, Gildarts just wants to get close to Kana." Myra sat down with Urza without knowing when, and said with a smile. "Sorry to bother you, you still have to cook and wash dishes." Hal said to Myra gently. "It's okay, Urza is doing most of it anyway." Myra smiled gently as always. "Damn Myra!" Urza muttered with an angry face. "What, Urza-chan? Do you want me to tell you about yours?" Myra looked at Urza with a smile, nuclear kindness, and Urza covered her mouth in an instant. So fast. Hal and Laxus were secretly shocked. Well, all in all, it was hard work. "Have a good rest tonight. Ever since the president talked to me during the day, I always have a bad feeling." Hal said, his eyes were a little solemn. The ominous fishing rod. Gildarts suddenly came out of the tent, curious. "Where is the fishing rod?" "Mine was broken by Kana." Gildarts seemed a little disappointed. "So you are so depressed because of this, uncle?" Everyone complained in unison. Myra and Urza ignored Gildarts, who was playing tricks, turned to look at Hal, frowned and asked, "Hal? What ominous premonition? It's hard to explain. I always feel that our enemies are around us, or that the enemies are very close to us." Hal said seriously. "To be honest, I have this premonition too." Laxus was silent for a moment, his expression became serious, and he said with a sullen face. Chapter 82. At night, Hal, Laxus, and others discussed and decided to temporarily build 5 tents around the camp, set up in the east, west, south, north and center. 5 S-class wizards were arranged to guard the 5 tents in the 5 directions to ensure the safety of the camp. Urza is responsible for the north. Myra is responsible for the south. Gildarts is responsible for the west. Laxus is responsible for the east. Hal is in the center. Although these arrangements were completed, Hal had some doubts in his heart. He couldn't help but think, if there were really enemies, how could they find Tenro Island? After all, even if he used to approach the sea area frequently, it was difficult to accurately find this hidden island. It is rumored that only those who have obtained the permission of the first president can find this mysterious island through the guild seal. If there really is an enemy, I'm afraid they won't be able to find the island wrapped in layers of mysterious magic, Hal said to himself. My magic perception will not lie, there must be something I can't detect. He meditated, and the wisps of magic around him gradually entered a state of silence. The entire island was almost visible under his perception, whether it was the beach or the deep cemetery, whether it was a huge animal or a tiny creature, he could sense it. But he couldn't feel the location of the girl and the black magic yesterday. Hal frowned slightly, doubtful. What is this inexplicable sense of crisis? Wait. In the sky. He looked up suddenly, and saw a magic ship wrapped in black magic floating in the sky above the clouds under the cover of purple magic. The purple magic circle below the magic ship condensed an extremely terrifying power, as if it could penetrate everything. On the ship, 500 dark wizards stood majestically in black robes. The 7 figures in front of them were filled with extremely terrifying magic power, all standing in front of the throne, waiting for the order of the one on the throne. The dark magic power distorted the air. President Hades, the magic naval artillery is ready. A woman in white clothes and dragging a crystal ball slightly bowed to the throne. Do it. The old man on the throne gave a low order. The magic naval artillery is ready. Target, the giant tree of fairy tale Tianlang Island. As the personnel on the ship acted quickly, hundreds of dark wizards gathered in the core area of the magic cannon and began to recite the spell silently. Everyone's body was entangled by black magic power, gradually extracting their own magic power and injecting it into the huge magic cannon. Dark magic final flame cannon. Hundreds of wizards chanted in unison, and the dark power in the magic cannon quickly accumulated, forming a huge dark energy ball. The surface of the magic cannon began to flash with a deep purple light, and the surrounding magic array was gradually dyed dark black by this dark energy. The dark energy continued to expand in the magic cannon, as if it was going to tear the atmosphere apart. This force was violently released from the muzzle of the magic cannon, turning into a shock wave that tore through the darkness, and headed straight for the giant tree of Tianlang Island. Hal's eyes were fixed on everything in the sky. Sensing the extremely powerful black magic, he took a deep breath and instantly condensed the terrifying golden magic. He quickly chanted the spell, his voice low and firm. With the power of the earth as the foundation, and the glory as the shield, all things return to one, and the sky is coming. The glorious glory appears in the world, the sacred shield rises from the ground. Super defensive magic array 6 pillars of God. Accompanied by Hal's spell, the ground shook violently, and 6 golden magic pillars instantly rose from the earth. Each magic pillar exudes a dazzling brilliance, inlaid with thick earth power and light magic. These pillars, like a huge barrier of light, quickly rose above Tianlang Island, building a powerful protective shield that enveloped the entire island. The clouds in the sky became more distorted due to the appearance of this magic circle, and the light penetrated through the dark clouds, forming a dazzling golden shield. The black magic and the golden magic collided in the air, making a deafening roar, and the entire Tianlang Island was shaken. The dark energy and the glorious protection intertwined, and the sky seemed to be torn into a huge crack, flashing with dazzling light. All creatures on Tianlang Island were frightened by the terrifying sound and quickly woke up. The birds flapped their wings and left the branches, the beasts fled in a hurry, looking for hiding places everywhere, the fish in the water jumped out of the water one after another, scrambling to escape. The entire island fell into chaos, as if the end of the world had come. The guild members in the camp had already run out, and there his eyes were fixed on the center, watching Hal, who was wrapped in terrifying golden magic, and the magic colliding violently in the sky. Urza, Myra, Gildarts, Laxus and others looked solemn, and each was ready to respond to possible changes at any time. After a long confrontation, the black magic was finally suppressed by the golden light. Hal's super defense magic circle 6 pillars was indestructible, gradually dissolving the invasion of dark energy. The huge dark energy group began to collapse under the irradiation of light, and was finally completely dissipated. As the dark energy disintegrated, the magic cannon in the sky also stopped roaring, and the smoke and light gradually dissipated. Hal's protective magic circle shone with golden light in the sky, appearing more stable and powerful. Oh! The old man on the throne asked softly. Makarov, that guy, has such a powerful subordinate, it's really amazing. Hades' voice revealed a hint of surprise. Report, President Hades, all the 100 wizards responsible for firing the dark magic, the magic final flame cannon, died due to excessive extraction of magic power. A black-robed messenger holding a samurai sword reported respectfully. I know, Hades' voice was majestic and indifferent, the super defensive magic of such a powerful wizard is indeed difficult to break. A woman wearing white clothes and dragging a crystal ball walked forward and asked in a low voice, since we can't destroy the source of the fairy's magic power, what should we do next, President Hades? Ultia, don't panic, just wait for Makarov's reaction. Hades responded calmly. Yes, President Hades. Ultia nodded respectfully. On the ground of Tenro Island, in the fairy tale camp, Makarov was surrounded by golden magic and slowly floated above the camp. His eyes fell on Hal, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground in the center of the camp, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Hal, you've worked hard. The enemy is really hard to guard against. Fortunately, you are here. Makarov's voice was full of praise and gratitude. President, tell everyone to be careful. The enemy is coming fiercely. I can feel a very powerful magical being in the sky. Hal stood up slowly, his expression became extremely serious. Really? Even so, we can't disturb the peace of the first generation. I want to shoot it down. Makarov pondered for a moment, his tone full of determination. I'll go, old man. Laxus walked over from the east of the camp, and Urza, Myra and Gildarts also returned to the center of the camp one after another, standing in front of Makarov with a solemn face. Okay, be careful. Makarov's eyes were serious and majestic, and the other people in the guild also felt this atmosphere and remained silent. Although Natsu was a little tired due to the fatigue of the day, he still looked at Laxus's figure with a burning gaze, his expression full of expectation. Hal! Laxus shouted. Oh! Hal responded quickly, and golden magic wrapped around Laxus, giving him the ability to fly. Laxus was wrapped in golden thunder magic, and he quickly rose into the air and broke through the thick clouds. In the night sky, the moon was blocked by layers of clouds and mist, and only a faint light could be seen. Under the moonlight, Laxus finally saw the huge black warship above the clouds. The appearance of the warship was wrapped in black magic, which looked mysterious and terrifying. Chapter 83. Laxus flew over the clouds and rushed straight to the black battleship. His eyes flashed with a firm light in the night sky, and he looked at Hades above. Hades sat on the throne, his eyes fixed on the floating golden figure, and his brows frowned slightly. The arrogant smile and short golden hair reminded him of a familiar figure. Boy! You are Hades was about to ask, but was interrupted by a sudden scene. Laxus's thunder dragon power condensed in the air, his muscles swelled, and his magic power exploded violently. His eyes flashed with a blazing light and thunder and lightning raged around him. He roared, and his voice shook the world, the roar of the thunder dragon. The terrifying thunder and lightning suddenly spurted out of his mouth, and the lightning rolled towards the black battleship like a tornado. The power of thunder bombarded the deck of the battleship, and the huge impact caused the entire battleship to shake violently, almost losing balance. The black magic deck on the battleship cracked instantly under the bombardment of thunder and lightning, and the dazzling light kept flashing. The battleship was torn into pieces under the power of thunder and lightning. Laxus's thunder dragon power ruthlessly destroyed the defense of the battleship, causing the magic ship in front of Hades to fall into extreme chaos in an instant. The power of thunder and lightning made the difficult repair of the black battleship impossible in an instant. Damn, this kid! Hua Yuan's huge figure couldn't stand at all, and the violent shaking caused his buttocks to press several innocent dark wizards. Just as the battleship was in turmoil, Altair stood up. She had long black hair, her bangs covered part of her forehead, she wore a white top and a yellow belt around her waist. She held a crystal ball in her hand, and silver-white light burst out from the crystal ball, forming a huge magic circle. The crystal ball in Altair's hand shone with silver-white light, and she said coldly, "Time flows backwards, fragments are restored, light and shadow are rewoven, returning to the origin. Arc of time." The broken deck gradually recovered as before, cracks and fragments slowly healed under the power of magic, and the state of the battleship quickly returned to its complete state before the battle. The whole process was like a miracle, which was amazing. The clouds gradually dissipated, and the moonlight sprinkled on the Tenro Island, allowing the fairy tale people below to clearly see the battle situation above. What? Gray looked at the restored battleship in shock. Time magic? This is a lost magic. It's troublesome. Let Laxus come back, President. Gildarts pondered, and then looked at the President. Makarov looked at Laxus who was confronting the huge dark battleship in the sky with a serious face. At this moment, Laxus raised his eyebrows and said with a smile in surprise, "I thought it was a little scum from somewhere, but it turned out to be the Devil's Heart battleship." Boy! Who is Makarov to you? Hades was wearing black armor, a double-horned helmet, and his eyes were fierce. Hey? What do you want to do with my old man? Laxus responded coldly. Is it really Makarov's grandson? Hades' voice revealed a hint of understanding and threat. Don't talk nonsense, take my move again. Laxus was furious, and countless thunder and lightning gathered around him again. The terrifying thunder and lightning even distorted the surrounding climate. The sky became darker, and countless thunders rolled around it. What resounded through the sky was the roar of summoning thunder and lightning, which fell from the sky and turned everything into ashes. Thunder pressure raging waves. Laxus's huge lightning ball bombarded the battleship below again, shaking the entire deck, and the power of thunder and lightning almost blasted through the rear end of the battleship. At this moment, Hades smiled coldly, raised his hands high, and dark magic surged around him, forming a black barrier. Eternal dark shadow. Hades' voice was low and majestic, and his black barrier swallowed Laxus's lightning attack and completely dissolved it. At the same time, Hades' body was lit up with the terrifying dark magic of the Holy Ten, and the atmosphere of the entire battlefield suddenly became suffocating. Everyone on Tianlang Island felt this suffocating magic. How is it possible? This magic is even stronger than how? Laxus felt this terrifying magic, and his whole body seemed to be stuck in the quagmire, and his movements in the air became slow in an instant. Boy! Let me take you to see my old friend. Hades's cold voice carried an irresistible threat, and a black magic light flashed in his palm. Then he released the dark chain, which could penetrate the target's body at high speed, and even explode after binding the target. The chain was compressed to the minimum and shot towards Laxus like a bullet. Hal! Makarov's voice was anxious and it came heavily. Hal reacted instantly, and the golden magic power quickly condensed, lifted Laxus' body and fell rapidly, bringing him back to Tianlang Island at a very fast speed. Laxus fell heavily back among the crowd, and Natsu, Freed, and others immediately surrounded him and asked anxiously, "Are you okay, Laxus?" "Ah, fortunately, Hal is very fast." Laxus answered with a breath. "The magic power of the President of the Demon Heart is too terrifying. It is indeed worthy of being the strongest force in the Balam Alliance. The 6 demon generals cannot be compared with it at all." Laxus' voice was full of helplessness. "I know, leave him to me." Hal patted Laxus's shoulder firmly, his eyes full of determination. "Are you sure?" Makarov looked at Hal with a serious face, his eyes full of worry about this battle. "Don't worry, President, with Gildarts and you here, I don't need to take risks, believe me." Hal's tone was firm, giving people enough confidence. "Well, in that case, it's up to you, Hal. Smash him." Makarov's voice was full of determination and hope. Vine-devouring forest spirit entanglement. Hal's voice echoed over the sky of Tianlang Island like a roar. His right hand slammed heavily on the ground, and the green magic gathered into a majestic force on the earth. Then, the earth trembled and the trees whispered, and the entire ground of Tianlang Island was instantly covered with a vibrant green. Boom boom boom! Countless huge and thick vines suddenly surged out of the ground of Tianlang Island, as if they were awakened ancient creatures, and the dense vines surged into the sky like a tide. They were so fast that people could hardly react, and they covered the entire black battleship in an instant. The thickness and power of these vines made the black magic deck on the battleship make a harsh cracking sound. The vines continued to stretch, entangle, and tear at the warship, like a group of ferocious beasts attacking their prey. The huge force caused cracks to appear on the deck of the warship, and the flashing black magic was twisted by the vines, like a piece of cloth that was constantly torn. The huge body of the warship shook violently under the fierce impact, and the dark wizards on the warship looked at this nightmare-like scene in horror, unable to stop the vines that were almost like a group of snakes. The spikes of the vines penetrated the outer shell of the warship and gradually penetrated into the interior, destroying the key magic devices. The black deck was constantly destroyed, and the core part of the warship was torn to pieces by the power of the vines, and the entire warship became precarious. The warship in the sky trembled violently due to the fierce attack of the vines. The entire warship swayed more and more unsteadily in the air and gradually lost its balance. Like a giant dark fortress that was about to collapse. The wizards on the warship could only watch their magic warship being completely torn apart, their eyes full of despair and fear. Damn it! Ulti-ya! Hades lost his composure instantly when he saw this, his eyes filled with unprecedented fear, looking at Ulti-ya beside him. Ulti-ya reacted quickly, she held the crystal ball tightly with both hands, and the silver-white magic power permeated her body again. A huge silver-white magic circle lit up above the dark warship, constantly restoring the broken warship. However, Hal's vines had already penetrated deeply into the warship, and the huge vines tightly wrapped around the warship, as if to tear it into pieces. The warship kept making a buzzing sound, and as Ultiya's magic power continued to recover to compete with the destruction of the warship, her magic power was also rapidly consumed. President Hades. We can't go on like this. We have to force a landing, otherwise my magic power will not be able to support it. Altair was barely standing on the shaking deck at this moment. As her magic power was consumed, anxiety and cold sweat appeared on her originally indifferent face. Damn Makarov! Forced landing! Quickly! We can't be destroyed like this anymore! Hades roared. He quickly left the deck, his body shining with terrifying dark magic, and ran straight to the vines surging from Tianlang Island. Eternal Dark Shadow! Hades chanted loudly, and the dark magic condensed into a black barrier in his hands, quickly swallowing up the vines' attacks. Dark Wave! Hades then sent out a dark sphere, which spun violently in the air and rushed towards the center of the vines with powerful destructive power. Two huge magic shocks broke the surging vines, bringing incomparable destructive power. Humph! Hal couldn't help but snort when he saw this. Although he still had some strength to continue restraining the dark warship, it was enough for the current stage. At this moment, the dark warship was forced to land, the huge warship slammed into the beach. When the dust cleared, Ultia on the dark warship knelt on the ground, sweating all over, having already lost most of her magic power, and gasping for breath. Chapter 84. Nice! Lucy was the first to jump up and cheer. As expected of Hal, Levi also echoed. Hey, Habby stretched out his cat claws. Seeing the falling black battleship, everyone's tense heartstrings finally relaxed a little. However, the 5S class wizards in the guild behind them looked extremely serious. President Makarov was also floating in the air with golden magic wrapped around his body, with boundless anger in his expression. Boys! Be alert! The enemy is the strongest force of the Balam Alliance. And there are many people, everyone must be extremely careful, Myra reminded on the side. Boom! On the deck of the huge black battleship, many black figures continued to emerge. Hades stood on the deck of the black battleship, his eyes cold and firm. Behind him were 500 elite dark wizards and the 7 followers of Purgatory in neat formation. His voice was as deep as thunder, resounding throughout the battlefield. The great dark wizard Zeref is right in front of us, crush these fairies. For Zeref! The dark wizards shouted in unison, and then they surged down from the warships like a tide, and the dark atmosphere enveloped the entire battlefield, filled with murderous intent. Seeing this, Hal slowly walked in front of the crowd, surrounded by golden magic power. He raised his staff high, and his voice was equally high, fight! Protect our holy land! Oh! Everyone responded in unison, and the fighting spirit in their eyes burned like flames. Suddenly, Natsu was wrapped in raging flames. He jumped out of the crowd without hesitation, and the flames circled around him like a dragon. Habby took him into the air and rushed straight into the center of the enemy. Come on! I'll fight as many as you can! Natsu roared, and the heat of the flames made the surrounding air begin to distort. Fire! Zankro saw Natsu from a distance, with a strange smile on his face, as if he had been expecting this moment. He stretched out his hand, and black flames began to rise around him, with a chilling breath. Leave this guy to me! Zankro grinned, and the black flames suddenly burst out. He rushed towards Natsu like a ball of flames in the dark. In the sky, the red and black flames collided, sparks flew, and the two instantly fell into a fierce confrontation. The flames intertwined, and the heat waves rolled up countless dust. That idiot! This is very dangerous, don't you know? Seeing this, Urza's eyes flashed with anxiety. She couldn't help but curse, quickly drew out her magic sword, and rushed towards Natsu without hesitation, ready to provide him with support. Behind her, Gray followed closely, with his hands crossed, and the cold air spread from his fingertips. This guy is always so reckless. He muttered in a low voice, but his speed did not slow down at all. The 3 thunder gods followed Urza and Gray without saying a word. Elfman's hands turned into huge fists like beasts, and his eyes flashed with fighting spirit. A man should protect his family. He roared and rushed forward. Hades stood on the battleship and looked down at all this, smiling coldly. It turns out that Makarov's subordinates overestimated their abilities. Lord Zeref is right in front of us, crush these obstacles. He waved his hand, and 500 elite dark wizards quickly charged and fought hand-to-hand with the wizards of Fairy Tale. In an instant, the battlefield fell into chaos, and powerful magic fluctuations continued to collide and tear in the air. Natsu. Happy warned from high in the sky, the opponent is not ordinary, be careful of his black flame. Who cares what kind of flame it is? Look at me to kill him. Natsu's fist burned more fiercely, and he suddenly swung a fire dragon's iron fist and rushed straight to Zankro. However, the black flame suddenly spread and instantly engulfed Natsu's attack. Zankro laughed, "Fire dragon? Ridiculous, your flame is ineffective against me." At this moment, Urza attacked from the other side, her magic sword with unparalleled sharpness, pointing directly at Zankro. Change clothes. Black feather armor. The sword light flashed, trying to cut through Zankro's defense line. Boom! A huge flame tower appeared on the ground, approaching Urza. Urza's face changed, and she switched to the Flame Emperor armor. The weapon is a fire sword, which can enhance the resistance to fire. At this time, Urza's hair will become a twin ponytail. The appearance is a red-based armor with black patterns and orange-yellow decorations. Queen of Fairies, your opponent is me. Azuma's deep voice sounded, and magic power continued to surge. Another 7 followers of Purgatory. Urza stood with a sword, without any flaws. Good posture, no flaws, Azuma exclaimed. The chaos on the battlefield has reached its peak, and the sky is filled with flames. The whole earth was shaking with the light of magic. Natsu and Urza were stopped by 2 powerful men from the 7 Purgatory followers, and the air around them was filled with tension and gunpowder. Gray swung his arms violently, and cold magic surged out of his body. His eyes were cold, and his hands quickly overlapped, ice make ice cough and slash. Countless ice blades rose from the ground and stabbed directly at the dark wizards in front, freezing their movements. These guys are endless. He gritted his teeth and said, "We must break their defense." Loki followed closely behind, holding a golden magic light ball in his hand, and his star power burst out, flashing lion beam. The golden beam of light shot out from his hand, sweeping across several dark wizards. He turned to look at Lucy and said with a smile, "Don't worry, Lucy, I will protect you." Lucy inserted the star spirit key in her hand into the ground and summoned Taros. "Taros, crush them for me." Taros raised the huge axe and knocked several dark wizards away with one swing. Lucy then turned and shouted, "Kana, the rear is up to you." Kana was already ready, with countless magic cards flashing in her hands. Her expression was calm, and she quickly threw out a card, Pope. Judgment. Composite magic god's judgment light of punishment. Countless golden lights fell from the sky and penetrated the enemy's formation. While attacking, she shouted loudly, "Wendy! Be careful behind us." "Yes, Miss Kana." Wendy stood obediently in the back and continued to add magic buffs to everyone. In front of Wendy stood Juvia and Lysina, as well as Meister, who was avoiding her eyes. Elfman burst out with the power of a beast. His body completely received the soul of the Beast King, and his strong arms waved like a boulder. Beast Soul Mammoth. His fist slammed the ground, cracking the ground, and several enemies were blown away. His roar was like thunder, "I won't let you hurt my friends." Fried stood at the front line, frowning, holding the magic sword in his hand high, spell Forbidden Realm in an instant. Countless glowing spells appeared on the ground, imprisoning the enemies in front in the formation. The enemy tried to break free, but the runes bound their movements. He said coldly, "You can't escape the barrier I designed." Begus Rose magic echoed in the air, and his hands continuously released several wooden dolls. X formation. Several wooden dolls condensed into an X shape, and launched a strong green shock that shook the battlefield, and a large number of enemies were blown away by the shock. The joint defense of the guild made it difficult for the dark wizards to approach their positions. Chapter 85. In the distance, Hal and Makarov were floating in the sky, looking at Hades on the black battleship and the 5 figures behind him with serious faces. Behind Hal were Gildarts, Laxus, and Myra, who were also attached to Hal's magic. Is the enemy just watching like this? Myra looked at the battlefield below with some hesitation. Don't worry, it's good for us to drag it out. With the president on the front battlefield, the enemy will be torn apart soon, Hal said after calmly analyzing the situation. Hal's analysis was correct. Hades was in a dilemma at the moment. He could feel the powerful magic of Hal and Gildarts, and Laxus and Myra behind him also had the strength to threaten him. On the other hand, looking at the cards in his hand, neither Altair nor Capriccio could beat Makarov. Damn Makarov, how could he have such terrible subordinates, and so many of them? Hades cursed secretly when he saw this. He then turned to Huayuan, Capriccio and Lasteros. You, go help Azma and Zankro to quickly eliminate the opponent, and then hold Makarov for a while together. Yes, Lord Hades. Capriccio and Huayuan responded respectfully. Lasteros turned into smoke and floated towards the battlefield. Melty! Go to the cabin and wake up Bruno. We can't go on like this. Hades turned his head and said. Yes, Lord Hades. The pink-haired lowly turned around and left quickly, and glanced at Ultia beside her before leaving. Ultia, stand by, Hades said seriously. Ultia did not respond to Hades' words. She was only thinking about Zeref at the moment. If it weren't for Hal and others who were staring at them in the sky, she would have left alone long ago. Hey? They actually sent someone down. Hal couldn't help laughing when he saw this. If they go, we will go too, Hal said. Myra, Laxus, I leave it to you, Hal. Don't worry, Hal, Myra said gently, and the magic attached to Hal flew far away. She didn't want to receive it in front of Hal. Leave a breath for that old thing. Laxus said coldly, his eyebrows slightly raised. Then, he turned into a golden lightning and rushed straight to the center of the battlefield below. Below, Grey and the Thunder Gods were in a fierce confrontation with the Dark Wizards. Although they tried their best, they still seemed a little powerless. Facing a large number of enemies, the battle situation was deadlocked for a while. Damn, how can these fairies be so strong? A dark wizard was furious and cursed dissatisfiedly. What are the 7 followers of Purgatory doing? Another wizard asked anxiously. Damn, Master Zankro was beaten all over by that fire dragon. A wizard exclaimed, his voice full of worry. What? The others responded in shock. At this moment, a golden lightning struck and fell directly into the central area of the dark wizards. The lightning tore through the night, bringing strong light and sound. Boom! The violent power of lightning exploded instantly, setting off a violent airflow, and dozens of dark wizards were knocked into the air by the impact force, making sharp screams. The ground was blown open by thunder. Huge cracks, the atmosphere of the battlefield instantly became chaotic. What happened this time? A dark wizard asked in horror, his expression full of incomprehensible panic. It's Laxus, the grandson of Makarov, Laxus, one of the strongest candidates of fairy tale. Another wizard recognized the owner of the golden lightning in horror. I heard that guy wiped out the entire 6 demon generals by himself. More wizards whispered in fear. Damn it! What are the 7 dependents of Purgatory doing? Another dark wizard roared, his voice full of anger and helplessness. Laxus was wrapped in golden thunder, and the lightning kept moving on his body, and his figure became larger. His might was like a thunder dragon, wantonly releasing amazing power. He waved his hands, and a golden Fang Tianji formed in the air, flashing a dazzling light. Thunder Dragon's Fang Tianji! He shouted, and the golden Fang Tianji swept forward in an instant, sweeping away all the enemies along the way. The power of the Fang Tianji was like a vortex that swallowed everything, and the powerful impact directly crushed the enemies. Impossible, this is impossible to beat. A dark wizard muttered to himself in horror, and the fear in his eyes had turned into complete despair. Retreat, retreat! Boom! Another black figure fell behind. Myra was wrapped in black magic, and her body exuded a strong dark aura. Under her feet, there were dozens of dark magic figures that looked like humans. Wizards. The battlefield was filled with a bloody atmosphere. The screams and pain of the dark wizards echoed in the air. Marajana's magic power devoured everything like the night, and the terrifying dark energy surged around her body. Her eyes scanned the surroundings coldly, without a trace of pity in her eyes. Escape? You will all die here. Myra's voice was low and cold, with endless threats in her tone. She leaped into the air, raised her hands, and the huge dark energy gathered in her palms, forming a terrible shock wave. Soul Exterminator! She roared, and pushed her hands forward violently, releasing a desperate dark shock wave. This force was like the claws of a demon, instantly tearing the air and smashing into the enemy in front of her. Boom! The entire battlefield was completely penetrated by this blow. Countless dark wizards screamed and were swallowed by the shock wave, their bodies instantly turned into ashes, and the wreckage was shaken away. Broken limbs and flesh were scattered on the ground, and blood gathered into a stream, flowing slowly. Myra stood in the ruins, the dark energy still surging in her body, and she looked down indifferently at the battlefield below her feet, which had turned into a Shura field. The corpses under her feet could no longer be distinguished. Those once arrogant dark wizards have now all become broken corpses, and only a few people have escaped by chance, and are stumbling away. The surviving dark wizards have long lost the courage to fight, and their eyes are full of fear. This is the legendary demon Myra Zhen. A wizard who was fleeing said tremblingly, his steps were unstable, as if he would fall at any time. The rumor that she destroyed the entire city is true. Monster, monster! A dying dark wizard recalled desperately. Ah! More people screamed and fled away without any rules. Even the members of Fairy Tale on the battlefield could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. They looked at this once gentle poster girl, who had now completely transformed into a ruthless killing machine. Everyone's back was wet with cold sweat, and their hearts were filled with complex emotions, awe, fear, and faint admiration. This is the true power of the demon Myra Jane. Fried murmured softly, his expression solemn. The entire battlefield became dead silent in an instant under Myra's absolute dominance, and no one dared to confront her again. The dark wizards cried and ran away, praying to be away from this dark queen. Chapter 86. Myra Jane, the rumors are all true. Compared to her, the bastard things I did before were just playing house, monster. Gajiel looked at the battlefield in the distance and muttered to himself in a cold sweat. Thunder. Laxus, so scary. Lily on the side covered his ears, his little face full of fear. He was very afraid of thunder. At the same time, the duel between Natsu and Zankro also entered a white-hot stage. Zankro smiled coldly, and the blood on his forehead showed his injuries. Hee hee ha ha ha, is the dragon's flame only this level? His words were full of provocation and confidence. It makes you seem like you are going to win. Natsu did not show any weakness, and the flames on his body became hotter and hotter. Natsu's eyes were firm, and he was not shaken by Zankro's provocation at all. Hee hee ha ha ha, what are you talking about? I have already won. Zankro raised his eyebrows, with an arrogant smile on his face. You can't eat my flames, but I can recover my strength by eating your flames. How can I lose this battle? Really? Come here, let your uncle Natsu punch you again. Natsu stretched out a hand and made a relaxed gesture, appearing extremely casual and confident. Such a provocation made Zankro feel angry and humiliated. Stinky boy! Let me show you the true strength of the God-Slayer wizard Zankro! Zankro roared. His right fist was wrapped in black flames, and he rushed towards Natsu with a huge momentum, fist of the flame god. Natsu's mouth corners slightly raised, and then mobilized all the flame magic. Hey! Mode. Lava Dragon. Natsu responded easily, and the flames on his body turned into the state of a lava dragon. The flowing lava surged, forming a thick layer of defense. Zankro's fist hit Natsu's lava dragon state, and the strong high temperature instantly burned him, causing Zankro to scream in pain. Zankro retreated painfully, feeling an unprecedented heat. Natsu smiled slightly, and his hands turned into lava claws with magic power, releasing hot flames. Zankro's attack seemed pale and powerless, and no matter how he attacked, he could not really hurt Natsu. Your so-called power of the god of fire is not worth mentioning at all. Natsu said coldly, and the lava dragon on his body continued to release strong heat, scorching the surrounding air. The god of fire of the god of fire! Zankro roared, combining the black flames in his left hand with the black flames in his right hand, turning them into a huge fireball and shooting at Natsu. However, Natsu just waved his hand lightly, and the claws of the lava dragon turned the fireball into ashes. The roar of the god of fire! Zankro spewed a large amount of black flames from his mouth, trying to drown Natsu. However, Natsu in the lava dragon state was not afraid at all, and his flames tore Zankro's flames into pieces. This is impossible. What kind of power do you have? Zankro's eyes were full of shock and despair, and his voice became trembling. Facing Natsu's almost invincible flames, Zankro's confidence and pride collapsed instantly. The fire of God is the strongest flame that surpasses the dragon fire, absolutely impossible. Zankro screamed hysterically. Dinner of the flame god, Zankro waved his hands, and the black flames turned into a pair of huge flame dogs, trying to devour Natsu. However, this last attack became insignificant in Natsu's lava dragon state. Burned to ashes. Natsu's voice was cold and firm. He walked towards Zankro with steady steps, and every step was accompanied by the roar and heat of the lava dragon. Ah! No! Zankro let out a desperate roar, and the flames in his eyes gradually extinguished. He felt Natsu's unparalleled power, and the black flames on his body began to evaporate gradually under the intense heat of the lava dragon. How could you? Zankro raised his head weakly, his eyes full of fear and confusion. The flame god's dinner was completely ineffective in front of Natsu, and the black flames were swallowed up by the heat of the lava dragon without a trace. Natsu stood in front of Zankro, with countless lava flowing in his body, emitting strong flames and heat. His expression was cold and emotionless. The gap between the so-called god you mentioned and the real dragon is too big. As Natsu punched Zankro in the chest, the powerful impact and terrifying flames burst out instantly, and Zankro groaned and spit out a mouthful of blood. The huge force blasted him away, and he fell heavily to the ground, losing the ability to fight. Chapter 87. At this moment, Huayuan and Capriccio finally arrived at the center of the battlefield. Their eyes swept across the battlefield full of corpses, and their faces became extremely gloomy. What is going on? Huayuan panted, his eyes full of astonishment and anger. He couldn't believe the tragic scene in front of him. The ground was full of torn corpses and broken limbs, and bloodstains. The powerful magic I just felt turned out not to be Asma's. Capriccio's face also became gloomy, and he cursed. Damn, it seems we are too late. The two rushed to the battlefield quickly, but because their speed was far behind the efficient imagination magic transmission of Lasteros, they were slow to arrive at the battlefield. At this moment, the situation on the battlefield has changed dramatically. Just as they were still looking for Lasteros's figure, a heavy breath suddenly came from behind them. Wait, after Huayuan had not reacted yet, and he was already suffocated by the terrifying breath behind him. Their bodies were quickly suppressed by some huge magic power. Oh? You reacted pretty quickly. The voice of coercion was cold and teasing. Lax's tall figure appeared behind them, with flashing lightning wrapped around his body, and the power of the thunder dragon was surging on his body like a blazing flame. But it was too late, Laxus's movements were as fast as thunder. He raised his fists high, gathered the power of the thunder dragon in his fists, and formed a suffocating thunder force. Thunder Dragon Jaw! Laxus roared, and his huge fist with the light of lightning blasted towards Huayuan and Capriccio. The power of lightning continued to gather around his fist, forming a huge golden lightning. Boom! The terrifying thunder roared and exploded in the air, and the power of the thunder dragon completely raised the area of dozens of meters to the ground. A huge deep pit was torn out of the entire ground, and the destructive power of thunder and lightning was like a storm that swept everything. Huayuan and Capriccio were hit by the huge lightning fist and lost their fighting power instantly. Their bodies became charred under the impact of lightning, their magic power was completely defeated, and the fear and pain in their eyes were revealed. This! How is this possible? Huayuan muttered to himself, his eyes full of disbelief and despair. It's really terrible power. Capriccio's voice trembled, and his whole body was shaken by the shock wave of lightning and fell to the ground powerlessly. Their bodies were completely destroyed, and they didn't even have a chance to resist. Laxus stood next to the huge pit and looked at the result in front of him coldly. There was a hint of cold determination in his eyes, provoking fairy tale? This is the end. As for Lastius, he was too late when he came. Laxus and Myra fell directly from the sky to the center of the battlefield. When he wanted to take action, it was over. He knew that he had no way to fight against the two strongest candidates, Laxus and Myra, so he had no choice but to come near Azuma and wait for an opportunity. At this moment, in the jungle battlefield, Urza and Azuma's battle seemed evenly matched, and Urza even had some difficulty fighting Azuma. As a wizard with the lost magic arc of the Great Tree, he himself was very warlike. If it weren't for Ultair's arc of time that restrained him too much, his strength should be the first among the 7 followers of Purgatory. Therefore, Urza and him were somewhat indistinguishable. Azuma in front of Urza was wrapped in countless vines, and the surrounding trees were constantly twisted and growing under the influence of his magic, as if all the trees were being used by him. Every attack of Urza was cleverly resolved by Azuma with vines, forcing her to constantly adjust her tactics. Humph, your magic is interesting, but it's far from enough. Azuma said coldly, and the roots of the tree kept surging, trying to restrain Urza's movements. Urza gritted her teeth, and the sword in her hand flashed. She knew she couldn't delay any longer and had to quickly change her fighting style to reverse the situation. She made a decision and changed her clothes quickly. Change clothes. Flame Emperor armor. Urza shouted, her body wrapped in red flames. The armor of Flame Emperor armor quickly covered her body, her hair turned into twin ponytails, and the red and black patterns on the armor looked particularly dazzling against the background of the flames. Humph, you want to fight my big tree with fire? Do you think my big tree is an ordinary tree? Stupid. Azuma looked at Urza coldly. He was not worried about the Flame Emperor armor and continued to control the surrounding trees to trap her. But Urza had decided to go all out, and her flames resisted after blocking Azuma's vine attack. Her attack became more fierce. The flame not only increased her strength, but also increased her resistance to fire magic. She knew that if Azuma could not be quickly dealt with, the battle would be more difficult. Sword of the Flame Emperor. Urza raised her sword high, and a blazing flame ignited on her sword, and the flaming blade swung violently at Azuma. The scorching flames approached Azuma, and the powerful attack also affected the surrounding trees. Vine tentacles. Azuma was surprised and quickly mobilized the trees to block the attack. He tried his best to resist, but Urza's flame power was obviously stronger, and his vines could not completely block this power. Don't underestimate the power of fire. Your trees are just saplings compared to Hal. Arisa shouted and waved her flaming sword continuously, and the flames continued to devour the surrounding trees and vines. Azuma's face became more and more ugly. Although he still tried to fight back with various magics, it was obvious that he could no longer completely block Urza's flames. He began to retreat, looking a little embarrassed. Leaf sword. Azuma roared, turning countless leaves into sharp blades and shooting them at Urza. These leaves were as sharp as blades, cutting with strong wind blades. At the same time, he also cast branch sword, turning countless branches into sharp blades, trying to attack Urza from two directions. However, Urza's flame blade has become extremely huge and hot. She swung the flame blade with all her strength, and the power of the flame turned all obstacles in front of her into ashes. Flame blade. Urza gritted her teeth and roared, and her flame sword split all the magic in front of her. Whether it was the sharp leaf sword or the powerful branch sword, all attacks seemed insignificant in front of the flame blade. The blazing blade of the flame blade mercilessly shattered all the magic that Azuma had cast. The leaf swords were burned one by the power of the flames, and the leaves turned into ashes in the blazing flames. The branch sword was also completely split by the fierce impact of the flame blade, and the sharp blades of the branches were almost unable to resist the flames and broke into pieces. Urza's flame blade drew a blazing trajectory in the air, approaching Azuma. Just as she was about to give a fatal blow, the shadow of Lastius quickly attacked from the side. His magic arc of materialization just exerted its fatal power at this moment. Lastius's right hand slowly deformed and finally materialized into a pitch-black giant sword. Pitch-black sword. The blade flashed with a strange light, as if it contained endless darkness and destructive power. He swung the giant sword with all his strength, aiming directly at Urza. Urza instantly felt the threat from behind, and she turned around in a hurry, trying to block it with the flame blade. But Lastius's attack speed was extremely fast, and the giant sword made a tearing sound in the air, and it was almost approaching Urza in the blink of an eye. What? Urza gritted her teeth and swung the flame blade at Lastius's giant sword with all her strength. The power of fire and darkness collided in the air, making a deafening sound. The flame blade was suppressed by the powerful dark power and gradually shattered by the power of the giant sword. Boom! The impact of the giant sword knocked Urza away, and she fell heavily to the ground. Cracks appeared on the surface of the flame armor, and it was obvious that she had suffered a lot of trauma. Seeing this, Azuma was embarrassed, but a little angry. He looked at Lastius angrily. Why did you interfere with my duel with her? How could such a strong man lose to a sneak attack? Lastius just pushed his glasses and said sarcastically, I don't want to care about your duel, but now, the front battlefield has collapsed, we are going to lose, and we can't waste any more time. What did you say? Azuma looked at him in shock. President Hades' order, don't forget, crush the fairies, Lastius said calmly. Azuma quickly recovered his composure when he saw this, and with a numb face, he commanded the surrounding trees and vines to start moving again. The leaf sword and the branch sword attacked from all directions, trying to trap Urza. Sorry, Urza, you are a strong man, our battle is a pity, you won this battle, but orders cannot be disobeyed. Urza barely stood up despite the severe pain, and her forehead was covered with sweat. You guys! Urza gritted her teeth and prepared to launch a final counterattack. She raised the flame blade, and the flames burned even hotter on her sword again. Emperor's blade! Urza shouted, and the huge flame the blade burst out from the tip of her sword, rushing towards the surrounding trees and vines, splitting them one by one. Her target was still Azuma. Although she was hurt, she was sharp and understood that she could only win if she killed one of them first. However, Lastius on the side was obviously waiting for this opportunity. Guardian Sacred Beast, Barakushas of the Wind materialized with his magic. A huge monster with 2 horns on its head and wearing steel armor quickly appeared above Urza's head, and its huge hoof stomped down on Urza's head like a hammer. What? What kind of magic is this? Urza knew little about Lastius's magic and was in danger in an instant. At this critical moment, Urza could hardly react at all, and despair surged in her heart. She knew that if this attack hit her, she would have no chance of survival. Ha 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 ha, Fairy Queen! This is the power of imagination. Lastius laughed triumphantly at this moment, but the dim light in his eyes was fixed on Urza. In the distance, Hal suddenly sensed a strong fluctuation of magic power and looked back involuntarily. Chapter 88. In the sky of Tenro Island, Hal, Makarov, and Gildarts stared at the black battleship below with heavy expressions, and the air was filled with tension. It's strange, there seems to be a living magical substance inside this battleship, like a huge power is sleeping. Gildarts's eyes became sharp, and his tone was uneasy. Well, I also felt it. This magic power is not ordinary dark magic. I thought it was Zeref's demonic power at first, but now it seems that this thing is closely connected with Hades. Hal nodded, a trace of vigilance flashed in his eyes, and a bit more vigilance in his voice. Makarov was silent, his eyes were solemn and sad, looking at Hades below, and whispered in a low voice, "No mistake. He is Prizit." Prizit? Hal frowned and asked with doubt. Prizit? This name? I seem to have heard it somewhere. Gildarts also showed a confused expression, frowning and recalling. The second-generation president of Fairy Tale. Pricked. Makarov's voice was low, with a suppressed pain. At that moment, he seemed to be carrying a heavy history of 100 years. What? Hal and Gildarts asked in shock at the same time, looking at Makarov in disbelief. Why did the second-generation president of Fairy Tale degenerate into the leader of the dark forces? Gildarts' voice was full of unacceptable anger and confusion. Makarov closed his eyes, as if he was bearing some kind of huge mental burden. I don't know, but we have to face the reality. I want to go down and see him in person and talk face to face. But we haven't fully found out the truth about the battleship. Hal's voice was calm but with a hint of caution, the front battlefield is about to end. If we move too quickly, he may take more extreme measures. Hal frowned slightly, and the sense of crisis in his heart never disappeared. Since the battle began, he felt a vague threat, as if some powerful existence was watching them. You are too cautious, Hal. Gildarts smiled and patted Hal's shoulder, his tone relaxed. In my opinion, this is probably some kind of biological connection magic that Pricked created to prolong his life. After all, his age is too abnormal, and it is impossible for humans to possess such terrifying dark magic. Hal thought for a moment and nodded, maybe you are right, uncle. But I always feel that something is wrong. Anyway, let's go down. Just as the three were about to land, Hal's expression suddenly changed drastically, as if he sensed the movement behind the battlefield. Without any hesitation, his figure instantly turned into a golden light and disappeared on the spot. Hal! Makarov and Gildarts looked at each other in astonishment, completely unable to understand why he suddenly acted. On the jungle battlefield, Urza was seriously injured, and seeing the huge hoof falling from the sky, the moment of fate seemed to have been decided. She closed her eyes and prepared to welcome the final outcome. At this moment, the golden light flashed like a meteor. Boom! The giant hoof was blocked by a powerful force in the air. Urza felt that she was being held firmly, and when she opened her eyes, she saw Hal's figure appear in front of her. The golden staff steadily resisted the attack, and the strong earth magic was radiating from the body. Hal's expression was cold, and his eyebrows were full of majesty, like an immovable mountain. Hal! Urza's voice was weak and full of surprise. Hal did not turn around, but whispered, "Sorry, I have been paying attention to the battlefield and neglected you." His words were full of apology, but the determination and protective emotion were unquestionable. "Why are you?" Urza's voice choked, and her heart was full of complex emotions. She has always been strong, but at this moment, facing Hal's mountain-like protection, she felt a deep warmth. Not far away, Rastaros sneered, his eyes full of teasing. Hey, it turns out that the Earth Dragon is here? What a scene of a hero saving a beautiful woman! Azma stared at Hal vigilantly, not daring to take his eyes off him. This guy has terrible magic power. Hal's eyes swept over the two of them coldly, and his voice was as cold as winter. You will all die today. Before he finished speaking, a surge of magic power surged on the staff in his right hand, and the air instantly became heavy. Then he chanted in a low voice, "The Earth Dragons, rock crack!" The earth was torn apart with his voice, and a huge rock shock wave poured out like a torrent. The ground was like a surging sea wave, hundreds of rocks suddenly rose up, forming a huge rock group, covering the entire battlefield. Boom! The huge impact force completely destroyed everything around. Azuma and Rastilos were knocked away by the boulder before they could even react. They vomited blood and fell heavily to the ground, completely losing their fighting power. In the jungle, the dust had not yet dissipated. Hal still hugged Urza tightly, touching her forehead lightly, and said in a soft and firm voice, "Don't be so stubborn in the future. I'm here." Urza's eyes were shining with tears, and she felt an unprecedented sense of peace in her heart. She nodded gently, raised the corners of her mouth slightly, and responded in a low voice, "Yet." Chapter 89. Under the night sky, a golden stream of light cut through the sky. It was Hal, who was holding the injured Urza in his arms and rushed to the black battleship at a high speed. He had just dealt with the 7 followers of Purgatory. Although he was physically exhausted, he was still worried about the safety of Makarov and Gildarts, and he rushed over without stopping. On the deck of the black battleship, the confrontation between Makarov and Hades was tense. Makarov was wrapped in golden magic, and Hades was wrapped in deep dark magic. The magic of the two top wizards surged in the night sky, and the battle could break out at any time. At the same time, Gildart's opponent, Bruno, the vice president of the Devil's Heart, stood in front of him. The air seemed to tremble in his breath, and the power of destruction was suffocating. The other members of Fairy Tail had completely defeated the Devil's Heart troops and stepped onto the battleship. When they saw the scene of Makarov and Hades confronting each other, their faces were suddenly filled with tension and worry. "Second generation president, I thank you. Without you, there would be no Fairy Tail today." Makarov's voice was steady and full of deep emotion. He paused, and his voice was firm, "But this does not mean that you can destroy our guild." Makarov's eyes were like torches, and his voice echoed on the battleship, "In order to protect the glory of the guild, I, the third generation president of Fairy Tail, Makarov Dolia, formally challenge you." Hades sneered, his eyes full of contempt, "Makarov, your confidence is a bit too much. Do you really think you can compete with me?" Makarov did not waver at all, stood firmly in the center of the battleship, and took a deep breath. His eyes were full of tenacity, as if he was as still as a mountain. "My family is by my side, and the holy land of the guild is at my feet. I have no reason to retreat." As soon as the voice fell, Makarov's magic power suddenly burst out, and the golden energy spread like a huge wave. His body instantly turned into a giant, and his feet stepped on the deck of the battleship, shaking the entire battleship to make a harsh groan. "Second generation. Today, I will protect the glory of Fairy Tail." Makarov's voice echoed in the night sky like thunder, and his huge fist flashed with dazzling golden light, smashing directly at Hades. Hades sneered, and the dark magic power surged around him. He quickly raised his hand, and the dark chain shot out from his palm, turning into a dark barrier to block Makarov's attack. With a loud bang, the power of gold and darkness collided violently, and the deck of the battleship was cracked under the huge impact, and fragments flew. The magic of the two people continued to intertwine, and the air was filled with tension. Although Makarov was powerful, Hades' dark magic was as hard to shake as the abyss. "Giant fist!" Makarov roared, and his other hand swung out suddenly, hitting Hades with destructive momentum. However, Hades' expression remained calm. His dark magic suddenly increased, and the chain exploded suddenly. Dark power exploded instantly on Makarov's fist, and the giant's body paused slightly, revealing a flaw. "Foolish Junior, the era of fairies is over." Hades laughed, and the dark vortex in his hand condensed and formed, hitting Makarov's chest directly. The golden giant staggered back and finally fell on the beach below the battleship, shaking the entire ground. Makarov stood up with a breath, looking sharply at Hades on the deck, realizing that all this was the other party's careful calculation. You, deliberately forced me here. Makarov said in a deep voice, his eyes locked on Hades. Hades smiled slightly, it's worthy of being Makarov, but no matter how smart a person is, he can't escape absolute power. Today is the day of your end. The dark chain swept in like a tide, surrounding Makarov's body. The power of gold and darkness collided again, but this time, Makarov gradually fell into a disadvantage. Fairy tale, can't lose. Makarov's magic power gathered again, and his huge fist was raised high, flashing a dazzling light. President Grandpa. Natsu saw Makarov being suppressed, and he was so anxious that his whole body was on fire, and he wanted to rush forward immediately. Don't attack. Makarov's voice resounded across the beach, firm and unquestionable. The people of Fairy Tale watched this scene nervously. Although they were anxious, they also understood that this was a battle that Makarov had to face alone. Prick sneered and shook his head, do you think you can turn the situation around with your strength? You don't understand, Hades. The power of the guild does not come from strength, but from our belief in each other. Makarov's eyes were firm, and golden light rose around him. In that case, let me show you the real darkness. Hades' dark magic suddenly expanded, and his right eye suddenly opened. The spell array symbolizing the power of the devil quickly condensed in the air. Devil's Law. With Prick's roar, the dark power rolled in and rushed straight to Makarov. However, Makarov's body was shining with golden light, the law of the goblins. He roared, and the golden light and the dark power collided violently. It seemed that only these two forces were intertwined between heaven and earth, and the shock wave swept in like a tsunami. The beach and the sky were torn apart by this terrifying energy. Ha ha ha! Makarov, is this what you call faith? Hades' dark magic prevailed, and it was about to crush Makarov's law of the goblins. At this moment, a golden light cut through the night sky. Really, people in the guild are always so stubborn. Hal's voice came like a breeze. Golden light fell from the sky, and Hal landed steadily beside Makarov with calmness and majesty. He held the unconscious Urza tightly in his left hand and sighed softly, leave it to me next. Chapter 90. The golden light was lingering, like a sacred power covering the entire space. Hal slowly descended from the sky, his left hand still tightly holding the unconscious Urza. His figure was as steady as a mountain, with a touch of calmness and majesty. Hal. Seeing this, Natsu and others breathed a sigh of relief and called his name excitedly. After Hal landed, he gently put Urza in a safe place. He looked at her softly, then slowly stood up and turned his head to look at the two presidents who were confronting each other. Are you finally here? Prick's eyes moved slightly, the magic power in his hand slowly converged, his usual arrogant expression gradually faded, and a trace of solemnity appeared on his face. Even he believed that the power of this prestigious new generation of young wizards should not be underestimated, and Hal's power was enough to threaten him. President Prizit. Hal spoke slowly, his tone calm, but with invisible pressure. There is no need to continue this battle. Prizit narrowed his eyes and stared coldly at the young man in front of him. Do you think you can stop all this by yourself? I have reached the abyss of the magic path. Since you are here, I will give you a chance to see my magic power. Prizit showed a strange smile, his eyes were full of unfathomable darkness. He slowly raised his hand, and the air around him suddenly became cold and heavy, as if even the earth was shaking. The executioner of heavenly punishment. He whispered, and the magic power around him began to surge violently, and the energy between heaven and earth seemed to be summoned by something. Gravel broke away from the ground, gathered and rotated in the air, and gradually formed a strange black magic spell. The sea surface in the distance also began to churn violently, the waves were surging, and the power of the sea was forcibly extracted and merged into this darkness. See this forbidden power. Prick's voice was low and hoarse, with unparalleled arrogance. As he waved his hands violently, countless gravel, trees, and even sea water on the ground were swallowed up by the dark magic and twisted and deformed. The black magic quickly gathered into huge virtual life forms one after another. They are demons. Each demon is a collection of magic, with a shocking form, as if the fear of darkness is materialized. These demons have different forms, some are as tall as giants, with thick limbs, and made of rocks. Some are slender and flexible, like snakes entwined on the earth, others waved their huge wings, roaring up from the sea, carrying huge waves. Each demon exudes extremely powerful dark magic, their eyes are empty and full of murderous intent, as if they are a demon army from the abyss. Impossible. So many demons actually have magic power no less than the lower level of the Holy Ten Laxus, who has been watching the battle coldly, has also lost his composure at this moment. Second generation, this kind of magic power, just fighting with me is like playing house. Makarov also had cold sweat on his head at this moment, muttering to himself. Prick raised his mouth slightly, young man, don't be too self-righteous. My power has reached the abyss of the magic path. If you dare to interfere, you will be buried here with these demons. Now, you still have a chance to submit to me. The demon army began to move, with heavy and fast steps. They seemed to have received invisible orders and rushed towards Hal and the people behind him. Leave it to me. Hal whispered, with a cold light in his eyes. With his steps, golden magic power continued to flow out of his body, illuminating the entire battlefield like the sun rising into the sky. He raised his staff, and the air around him trembled. In an instant, a huge golden barrier rose from the ground, blocking the attack of the demon army. Hal's eyes narrowed slightly, and the magic power in his body seemed to have attracted the purest light between heaven and earth, and instantly gathered around him into a dazzling golden torrent. The light was so holy that it seemed to wash away all evil and darkness, and even the haze in the air dissipated, and the entire battlefield was silent. I won't let you succeed, second generation. His voice was low but firm, with an unshakable belief. The golden light swirled and rose around him, gradually rising like the scorching sun, illuminating the entire earth. He raised his staff high, and the magic power around him spread like ripples, and the air seemed to ring a sacred bell. Hal's voice echoed on the battlefield, the light that illuminates the world is pure and flawless light, descending from the sky, judging all evil. With the last sentence, he waved his hand suddenly, as if he had attracted the power between heaven and earth. Countless lightsabers condensed from the void and out, each lightsaber exudes a holy light that cannot be looked directly at, as if it is a judge from heaven. Those lightsabers are quickly arranged, neat and majestic, like an endless army of light, sweeping towards the demons. Light magic holy sword judgment. Hal said coldly, and as his voice fell, the lightsabers shot out like a rainstorm, illuminating the entire sky. Under Hal's control, the lightsabers whistled out, cutting through the darkness, and hundreds of golden lights were like a sacred storm descending on the battlefield, slashing at the demons fiercely. Each lightsaber carries a terrifying power, and the bodies of the demons are cut one after another under the impact of the lightsabers, making a shrill roar. Hal's light magic does have some restraint on these demons. The dark aggregate appears fragile in front of the holy light, and is gradually torn apart and disintegrated by the lightsabers. However, despite this, the number of demons is too large. Every time one is defeated, another one is born from the earth or the sea, in an endless stream. Holy Sword Judgment. Hal waved his hand again, and hundreds of lightsabers formed again. However, those huge demons seemed endless. Although the demon army was injured, they continued to advance towards him. These things are indestructible. Hal felt a little anxious. He had released powerful light magic several times in a row. But the number and strength of the enemies did not decrease at all, and the battlefield was still shrouded in darkness. At this moment, Prick, who was hiding in the dark, showed a cunning smile. He had been watching coldly, waiting for this moment, the gap when Hal was distracted to deal with the demon army. He moved quietly and silently, and his hands silently condensed a dark magic wave, and then attacked quickly like a venomous snake. Young man, you are still too young. Prick's voice seemed to come from the shadows. Hal was concentrating on resisting the demon's attack, and suddenly felt the dangerous breath coming from behind. He glanced out of the corner of his eye and saw a powerful dark magic coming straight at him. Time seemed to slow down at this moment. The dark chain flew out of Prick's hand, piercing through the air at high speed and heading straight for Hal's back. Light barrier. Hal almost instinctively waved his staff, and a golden barrier instantly rose from behind him, barely blocking the fatal blow. However, the dark magic power was too strong. Even though Hal's barrier was quickly formed, it still failed to completely resist the power. The chain hit the barrier, shaking out a dazzling spark, and the barrier was also shattered under this fierce impact. Hal groaned. Although he blocked the sneak attack, the huge impact still made him stagger back a few steps, and his blood was surging. Prick smiled coldly, with a gleam of victory in his eyes. Do you think light can dispel darkness? Too naive. In front of darkness, light is just a fragile candle. The demon army took the opportunity to approach, and Hal's barrier was about to collapse, and the situation was precarious. Makarov and others wanted to help, but were stopped by Hal's firm eyes. "Don't come over!" Hal shouted, his voice was full of helplessness and determination. He gritted his teeth and barely stabilized his body. He knew that this battle could not be easily intervened by others, otherwise it would only increase casualties. At this moment, Prick's eyes flashed, and then a black bullet was condensed. The dark energy twisted in the air and went straight to Hal's head. Black bullet. Hal's light magic barrier collapsed almost instantly under the impact of the black bullet, and the power of the bullet hit Hal's head directly. The huge impact force knocked him to the ground, and a deafening sound broke out on the battlefield. "Hal!" Seeing this, everyone screamed, and the air was full of shock and uneasiness. Prick laughed loudly, his voice full of arrogance and pride. "Haha, young man, do you think you can compete with me?" However, Prick's laughter soon stopped in front of Hal's slowly standing up figure. 3 layers of magic protection on Hal's head gradually appeared from the outside to the inside. The outermost layer is the shield formed by the indestructible earth magic. The middle layer is the desert armor integrated with the skin. The last is the dragon scales of the earth dragon. Although Prick's attack was amazing, Hal's protection was as solid as a mountain, and his body still stood firm. Hal's eyes were cold and firm, and his expression did not change at all. Hal slowly stood up and said as if he was not affected by anything, "Continue, is the test enough?" His voice was like a cold wind, with unquestionable majesty and determination. At this time, his body was shining with dazzling golden light, the dragon power surged in his body, outlining layers of dragon scale-like light, as if integrating his body with the earth. He raised his hands slightly, and the staff looked extremely sacred under the light. Hal's eyes were as firm as iron, and he took slow steps, each step causing waves of vibration, as if the earth was responding to his power under his feet. As he took a deep breath, the magic power between heaven and earth seemed to be guided by him, and the whole space was trembling slightly. The secret of Dragon Slayer Earthquake. Hal's voice resounded on the battlefield, full of incomparable power and determination. As soon as the voice fell, Hal raised his hands high, and the staff was covered by golden light, as if guiding the power between heaven and earth. His body exuded a strong dragon breath, and the golden dragon scales shone on his skin, showing his true power as a dragon slayer. As he swung the staff violently, the earth shook violently, and the entire beach was shaken in an instant. As this move was launched, the entire beach shook violently in an instant, and the earth seemed to be torn apart. A huge earthquake wave spread rapidly from Hal's feet, and the power of the wave was like a raging wave, sweeping everything. The cracks in the ground spread at an alarming speed, the beach collapsed in the vibration, and stones and sand flew, forming a natural disaster. Prick and the demon army were swallowed up by this terrifying force without warning. The power of the earthquake wave was enough to shake the waves of the sea, and the sea water was pushed into the air by the strong vibration, forming a huge water column. Around Prick, the ground was torn apart, the dark demons were shaken away, and the sky was filled with chaos intertwined with darkness and dust. Prick widened his eyes in horror, and his powerful magic defense seemed extremely fragile in front of this force. The shock of the earthquake wave directly suppressed his body and the demons around him, making them unable to move. His dark barrier was also difficult to resist under the impact of the shock wave, and frequent cracks spread on the dark barrier, and was finally completely shattered. The demons howled in pain under the impact of this force, their bodies were torn into pieces, and the entire battlefield was involved in endless chaos. The entire beach was shaken beyond recognition, and huge cracks split the originally calm coastline into pieces. The tremor of the earth caused the entire area to shake violently, and even the sea water was splashed and scattered, as if the earth and the ocean were conquered by the power of this shock. Hal stood at the center of the vibration, his expression was still calm and resolute. His staff flickered in the golden light, looking extremely majestic. Under the power of this move, the scene of the battlefield was completely changed. The originally noisy demon battlefield was submerged by the terrifying earthquake wave, and the end of the battle seemed to be frozen at this moment. Prick was suppressed to the ground under the impact of the earthquake wave. How is it possible, such destructive power? His expression became distorted in the vibration and chaos, and the powerful dark power was gradually defeated by this ruthless vibration. In the end, the entire beach was shattered beyond recognition, everything on the battlefield was completely destroyed, and Prick lay powerlessly on the ground, his life or death unknown. Chapter 91. Inside the black battleship, the air seemed to be stagnant. Gildarts and Bruno confronted each other, and the steel structure of the battleship made a sharp twisting sound in the magic of their confrontation, and it could collapse at any time. The fairies still have the energy to rush in? I say, can you fly? Bruno's voice was as cold as iron, and the dark gravity magic wrapped around his body, like a dark iron hammer oppressing all directions. The metal wall of the battleship began to dent due to the strong gravity, and a tooth-grinding squeezing sound rang in the air. Gildarts smiled, and the white crushing magic swirled around him like a silver storm. You hid for a long time. Gildarts' voice disappeared before he finished speaking, and his fist went straight to Bruno. Boom! The two fists collided, and the magic was agitated. The interior of the battleship vibrated violently, and the steel plate cracked instantly, sparks flew. Tisk! Bruno frowned slightly, obviously feeling irritated. He suddenly increased his magic power, and an invisible gravity shock wave swept out. Gildarts was suddenly pushed out by the lateral gravity, and his body shot out of the warship like a cannonball, crashing through the hull and shaking the deck. The entire warship made a heavy roar in the vibration, as if it would collapse in the next moment. Gildarts drew an arc in the air and fell heavily into the jungle, and a large area of trees were razed to the ground in an instant. He stabilized his body and looked at Bruno flying in the distance calmly. Interesting, what do you want to do? For you, this kind of magic power without lethality should not be wasted. Gildarts looked at Bruno with a smile on his face. Bruno did not reply, but just looked at him coldly, with a hint of murderous intent in his eyes. Don't you dislike fighting at your doorstep? Bruno said lightly, and magic power condensed in the air. Gildarts sneered, yes, especially for a scum of the dark world like you. Bruno narrowed his eyes slightly, and suddenly waved his hand. The gravity around him increased sharply, and the air seemed to be distorted by the pressure. The ground groaned in pain, as if it was about to collapse. Are you kidding me? Gildarts didn't care. The crushing magic power rose like white flames around him, and the suppression of gravity instantly disappeared. He approached step by step with a cold smile on his face. Crush! Gildarts shouted, and the white magic power condensed in his fist and blasted towards Bruno. Bruno felt a strong crisis, raised his hand instantly, and released gravity horizontally. Boom! The white crushing power and the dark gravity collided violently in the air, and the terrifying shock wave swept around, shattering the earth and trees. When the dust cleared, the battlefield had turned into a huge pit tens of meters deep. Gildarts stood in the pit with ease, and raised his eyebrows slightly, not bad, close to the level of the upper Saint 10. There was a bit of contempt in his voice, but, compared to me, you are still far behind. Arrogant! Bruno roared angrily, raised his hands high, and the dark magic surged like a tide. Super gravity ball! Bruno roared, and gravity condensed into a point in the air, forming a black hole like magic, madly devouring everything around. The ground, air, and even light were compressed into that point, like an abyss of destruction. Interesting magic, black hole. Gildarts smiled unchanged. But you have forgotten what my magic is. He walked forward slowly, and the white magic condensed on his fist, and the surrounding air seemed to be crushed and torn in his hands. Destroy evil and show justice. One day. Gildarts swung his fist suddenly, and the white magic circle exploded in front of him, and the terrifying crushing force roared out. Bruno's super gravity ball collapsed instantly, as if it had never existed, and the white crushing force swept in like a tsunami. Impossible! Fear flashed in Bruno's eyes, and his body was completely disintegrated in the crushing magic. Hair, skin, flesh, not a trace was left. Silence enveloped the battlefield. Gildarts stood in the huge pit, raised his head slightly, and looked indifferent, as if everything just now was just an ordinary warm-up. Being able to block my full-strength attack, it is considered to be quite powerful. He muttered to himself, swung his cloak, and slowly walked towards the main battlefield on the beach. In the distance, a deafening roar came from the beach, and the sea water was swept into the sky. Gildarts narrowed his eyes and sighed, this magic. Is it Hal? This kid is really a monster. Chapter 92. On the beach, the intensity of the battle has exceeded everyone's imagination. Hal's magic power is like an endless storm, and the shock waves cut through the air. Even if he can accurately control the release of power, it is still difficult to prevent the ground on the edge of the island from collapsing and sinking into the sea. Around the battlefield, the waves roared and the island was crumbling, as if it would be swallowed up by this destructive power at any time. Makarov stood on the edge of the broken battlefield, his eyes full of complex emotions. "How do you feel, Hal?" "Pricked?" he asked in a low voice, with hesitation and reluctance in his tone. Although the friendship between the master and the apprentice for 40 years has been repeatedly determined to be severed, it is still difficult to completely abandon it. Hal closed his eyes and felt, frowning, his body magic power disappeared, but, there is something wrong with the magic. Hal's tone was full of doubt. "What do you mean?" Makarov suddenly became nervous. "The source of Prizit's magic power is not here, but on that warship." Hal's eyes flashed with a hint of coldness, and his perception became clearer. Makarov was about to respond, but the sea suddenly raised huge waves, and accompanied by a trembling dark magic, Prizit suddenly rose from the sea water. The sea water around him was drawn into the vortex, accompanied by the violent magic power, like a storm covering the sky and the sun, stained the sky and the earth with the breath of death. Prizit's broken armor looked extremely embarrassed, and his former dignity had been blown away by the wind. The armor was broken, the helmet disappeared, revealing a scarlet magic eye, which was filled with endless murderous intent and coldness. "Makarov, you really have a lot of good men." Even Bruno was defeated. "It seems that Gildarts is not simple." Prizit sneered, but his voice was no longer pure contempt, but mixed with caution and vigilance. Hal sneered, "You think too much, I am much stronger than Gildarts." Prichter laughed contemptuously, "Ha ha ha! How arrogant! I went deep into the magic 40 years ago, collected countless lost dark powers, and created the strongest force in the dark world. How dare you little devils call yourself strong in front of me?" Before he finished speaking, the sea water suddenly churned, and huge waves crushed Hal and Makarov like a mountain. The power of darkness oppressed the whole air and trembled. Hal's expression remained unchanged, raised his hand and shouted, "Tree magic 8 shields!" In an instant, a huge tree barrier rose from the ground and blocked the members of Fairy Tale. The huge waves hit the barrier, but could not shake it at all, but turned into countless raindrops falling from the sky. "Where is Prichter?" Hal looked around vigilantly, but he could no longer sense Prichter's magic. At this moment, a cold voice came from midair, "Amaterasu 28 styles." The spell formation instantly surrounded Hal, and the violent energy attacked him like a flood. Prick's laughter echoed in the air, "Boy, you are too arrogant. You can't win when you are protecting these weak people." However, Hal's calm voice came from the smoke, "Do you think everyone behind me is weak? If the old man didn't order, we would have rushed up to deal with you." The smoke dissipated, and Hal stood in the center of the spell formation unscathed, with contempt in his eyes. Prick's smile froze instantly, and his eyes fell on the people behind Hal involuntarily. Natsu, Laxus, Myra, Urza, everyone was imposing and murderous. Prick's face was gloomy, and he growled with gnashing teeth, "You bunch of brats! Sharp-tongued brat!" He roared, and the dark eternal dark shadow barrier quickly spread, like an endless abyss, rushing towards Hal. Hal chuckled, flashed, and easily avoided Prick's attack. "Do you really think we dare not take action? If it weren't for the President's order, you would have died long ago, second generation." Prick sneered, "As long as I summon the devil now, you will not be my opponent." "Oh? Then why don't you summon it?" Hal approached him with cold eyes. "You can't use that kind of magic now, right? The source of your magic power is in the battleship, and most of your magic power has been consumed by recovering from your injuries." Prick was hit by these words, and his face froze slightly. He tried to hide his inner panic, but Hal's insight had obviously defeated his last bit of disguise. "How do you know, little brat?" Prick growled in a low voice, his mind already in disarray. Hal chuckled and said calmly, "We are wizards of the same level, and we know each other's magic fluctuations very well. Besides, you have to cover up your weaknesses. The action is too obvious, and you can guess it without too much analysis." Prick was speechless. He knew that what Hal said was true. At this moment, he had no way out, so he could only bite the bullet and fight to the death. Prick's pupils shrank sharply, his eyes were full of despair, and he roared madly, "Amaterasu 100 styles!" With his roar, the 7-layer spell formation instantly surrounded Hal, and the energy in the formation quickly accumulated. The power of the explosion shook the surrounding air to distort. Makarov and others watched from afar, frowning. However, Hal stood in the center of the formation, and his face was still relaxed. Die! Brat! Prick roared. Hal looked at the upcoming spell explosion, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly, as if he didn't take it seriously at all. Still want to resist? Hal whispered, with a hint of playfulness in his voice. In that case, let me show you something interesting. As his voice fell, his left hand suddenly began to turn dark, and the dark magic quickly covered his whole body like a tide. The dark magic wrapped around him, twisting like a snake. Then, his figure began to gradually become illusory, as if blending into the surrounding darkness. Mode Death Form. Hal's voice was cold and low, with a suffocating pressure. Just before everyone reacted, Hal's figure had already walked out of the spell formation, as if those powerful spells could not restrain him at all. His movements were like a ghost, easily passing through all attacks, and appeared directly in front of Prick. Prick's eyes flashed with fear and uneasiness, watching Hal approaching, but unable to avoid it. Hal's eyes had turned into a dark light at this moment, like the gaze of the god of death. He looked down at Prick and said coldly, "You have no way out, Prick." Prick felt death approaching and his whole body stiffened. He had never seen such a terrible power before. The deep darkness and the oppressive feeling of death made him feel as if his vitality was constantly draining away. Chapter 93. On the beach, Hal had completely lost his human form. The life magic and dragon-killing magic of the earth that he was proud of dissipated in his body, leaving only the dark death power in his left hand. The originally indestructible defense and amazing life recovery power were no longer there. Now he seemed to have turned into a black shadow. His whole body was surrounded by twisted black death magic, and the air seemed to freeze. What kind of power is this? It doesn't even look like magic. Prick murmured, revealing a hint of disbelief in his eyes. Just before he finished speaking, Hal's figure suddenly disappeared from his sight. What? Where are the people? Prick looked around nervously, feeling a piercing chill on the back of his neck, as if freezing his nerves. Behind me. Prick turned around suddenly and tried to fight back, but every blow missed, and Hal's figure was as fast as a ghost and unpredictable. Damn, how could he change so fast? Prizit's heartbeat quickened, and cold sweat broke out. This power is similar to Jelal's. Prizit whispered to himself, with an ominous premonition in his heart. Hal smiled coldly, and his voice seemed to come from all directions, with a suffocating sense of oppression. You know, my left hand. It's very magical, just a light touch is enough. Look. What? Prizit's pupils suddenly contracted, and then he felt that the vitality in his body was being sucked away continuously. Even if there was a heart in the battleship to provide him with magic power, it was just a drop in the bucket at this time. For the first time in decades, he truly felt the approach of death. Hal's voice became more hoarse and cold, as if it slowly seeped out from the depths of darkness. My left hand is a magic that absorbs vitality. Prizit breathed rapidly, and felt that the strength of his whole body was rapidly draining away, as if swallowed by the invisible darkness. And my right hand, Hal continued, is the magic that gives life. Before he finished speaking, Prick's heart suddenly sank, as if he realized something more terrifying. What's more, Hal said with a hint of cruel teasing in his voice, I am also a user of earth dragon magic, controlling the most destructive dragon-killing magic. This is my power, my three holy magics. Hal said softly, with an absolute sense of control. I have three kinds of magic, which can exist at the same time, or I can completely integrate one of them into myself, strengthen my magic power, and give it different attributes. You will never be able to defeat me. Hal said coldly, his tone full of absolute confidence and oppression. At this time, Prick's pupils suddenly dilated, as if he saw some extreme horror in Hal. Although he tried to speak, his throat seemed to be suppressed by an invisible force, and he couldn't make a sound at all. In your body, in your body. Prick struggled to say the last words, there is a god. However, before he could finish his words, the magic power in his body had been completely sucked out, and his vitality was quickly lost. The once powerful old man finally fell down powerlessly, looking as if he was withered. The heart inside the black battleship also dimmed and became extremely weak. Finally fell down. Hal returned to his original form, gently wiped the sweat from his forehead, and smiled, Don't worry, second generation, I won't kill you, I have to ask the old man for instructions. Seeing Prick fall, everyone gathered around and celebrated the victory happily. Hal! You are so awesome! What was that just now? Did you also eat his dark magic? Natsu was so excited that his face flushed, staring at him with bright eyes. Hal, you looked so scary just now. Habi said with a scared face. Not a bad form, try to fight me next time. Laxus raised his eyebrows, his tone full of fighting desire. The other members of the guild also cheered, we won. In the distance, Myra watched the scene quietly with gentle eyes, with a relaxed smile on her face. Hal also looked at her gently, feeling full of happiness in his heart. However, Hal did not notice that in the forest deep in Tianlang Island, a black-haired boy suddenly woke up from his dream, his eyes full of panic and anxiety. God Angsaram! The boy shouted in horror, his eyes piercing through the dense forest and looking at Hal in the distance. He saw Hal's face full of a happy smile, saw him celebrating the victory with his companions around him, and saw Myra staring at him quietly. Who are you? Why can you be so happy under his gaze? Why can you still love someone? The boy's voice was trembling, his eyes were the forest was filled with incomprehensible doubts and jealousy. Who are you? The black-haired boy's voice was filled with endless resentment and anger. With this roar, in just a moment, the originally vibrant forest seemed to lose all its vitality in an instant. The green trees began to wither, the grass quickly withered, the water flow of the river stagnated, and the plants and mountains fell into death. The withered yellow leaves fell quietly, and the breath of death filled the air. Only the boy's terrifying red pupils were still bright and deep, full of destruction and hatred, staring at Hal's direction, as if to devour him completely. Chapter 94. Who are you? The black-haired boy's voice was full of uncontrollable resentment and anger. As soon as the voice fell, the green trees, grass, and rivers in the jungle lost their vitality in an instant, and the plants and mountains quickly withered and turned into a dead wasteland. The dead leaves were falling, and the breath of death was everywhere. The boy's blood-red pupils emitted a terrifying light, staring at Hal in the distance, as if he wanted to devour him. At the same time, deep in the jungle, the weak Oloshia and the 12-year-old pink-haired little lowly Melty struggled to move forward in the barren forest. Behind them, Grey, who was naked, chased closely, with complicated feelings in his heart. Along the way, he heard too many conversations about Oloshia and Melty, and coupled with her appearance that was almost the same as Uru, Grey had almost confirmed her identity Uru's daughter. However, he couldn't believe that Uru's daughter would fall into the devil's way and commit so many heinous crimes. Suddenly, a suffocating breath of death came from the depths of the jungle, and the dark magic swept past Grey like an aftermath. He instantly felt cold all over and sweated. Although the source of this power was very far away, its aftermath still made Grey feel painful. It's Master Zeref. However, Ultiya was not affected at all. Her face instantly blossomed with a crazy look, and her eyes were filled with undisguised fanaticism. Hurry up, Melty! Master Zeref is calling me. I want to help him remove the seal and restart my life. Ha 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 ha. Oh, oh. Melty also barely kept up with Ultiya's pace. Grey, who was far away, heard these words and his face was extremely ugly. It's actually Zeref? Why did he appear in our holy land? He subconsciously turned around and wanted to inform the president and Hal. However, when his eyes fell on Ultiya, who was similar to Ulu again, his steps stopped. You are you. Grey looked gloomy, his inner struggles showing on his face. Damn it, I can't just let her go. He gritted his teeth and finally decided to continue tracking Ultiya and Melty. Meanwhile, Hal on the other side was celebrating victory with everyone. After returning to the camp, he began to treat everyone's injuries. Just as he had just rested and drank a glass of water handed by Myra, his magic perception suddenly locked onto the dark magic fluctuations deep in the jungle. It's that black magic. Grey? Why is he there? Hal frowned slightly, full of doubts. Hal? What's wrong? Myra asked with concern. Nothing, Grey seems to be chasing 2 Purgatory 7 followers, I'm worried, I want to go see him. Hal replied. Grey? Speaking of which, Grey disappeared after the frontal battlefield ended. Natsu suddenly remembered something, and said lazily while enjoying Lucy's massage. I'll go with you. Laxus stood up and suggested. No, I can go by myself, don't worry. Hal smiled slightly, then turned into a golden light and disappeared. At the moment he left, the white-haired girl who had been hiding her magic power nearby seemed to have noticed something and left quietly. In the jungle, Ultiya stood in front of a young man with black hair and black eyes, with a crazy look on her face. Lord Ziref! I finally see you. Her eyes were full of admiration and fanaticism. Ziref seemed indifferent at this moment. Over the long years, he had long been accustomed to such scenes. Those who were blinded by illusory legends always regarded themselves as their salvation, and even resurrected him at all costs. Lord Ziref, come with me, I will wake you up and restore your strength to its original state. Ultiya said with anticipation. However, Jalal just looked at her with pity and said coldly, awaken? What nonsense are you talking about? I have never fallen asleep. Ultiya was stunned and asked in disbelief, you didn't fall asleep? Then why did you disappear all these years? I'm just tired, just resting here. Jalal responded calmly, his tone full of disdain, get out of the way, I have more important things to do. No. Lord Jalal, you can't just leave like this. Ultia's expression suddenly twisted, and her eyes were uncertain. I can feel that there is no magic power in your body, you must be asleep. We paid everything and killed so many people just to see you. Her words were full of obsession, and the magic power in her body suddenly surged, trying to knock Jalal unconscious and take him away. However, Jalal lightly blocked her attack and grabbed her hand indifferently. No magic power? Ha! The gap between us is so big that you can't even see my toes. Ziref said sarcastically. Ultia looked at him with horror, totally unable to believe that her full-strength attack was so easily blocked. The breath of death instantly surrounded her. Just as Ziref's pupils turned red and were about to end her life, a golden light flashed, and Hal appeared between them, tightly grasping Ziref's shoulders. Who are you? Hal asked vigilantly, his eyes fixed on Ziref. Ultia had lost her strength and fainted on the ground. Gray came from behind, and although he was shocked by Hal's sudden appearance, he still ran over to support Ultia. Gray, take the pink-haired girl and this sad woman, let's go. Hal said lightly, but his eyes never left Ziref. Okay. Gray responded, holding Ultair with one hand and dragging the frightened Melty away. Zerf stood there, silent for a moment, as if sensing something. Then, he turned coldly and looked at Hal with a cold face. The god of Angsalram seems to be watching you. Chapter 95. The god Angsaram seems to be watching you. Hal was stunned, obviously not expecting Jalal to suddenly say such a strange thing. What are you talking about? Hal frowned in response, his eyes full of doubt. You are not from this era. Jalal stared at him sharply. How do you know? Hal's heart sank suddenly, and he looked at him alertly. Your magic and breath reveal everything. Jalal said slowly, his tone calm but with a heart-pounding insight. Who are you? Hal's golden magic suddenly burst out, and the air around him vibrated, full of warning. However, in the face of this sudden threat, Jalal just smiled lightly, without any fear. He slowly said, Me? You should have heard it countless times, Dark Mage Jalal. Hearing this name, Hal's pupils suddenly shrank, and the shock in his heart could not be concealed. You seem to still have the magic of the eclipse in your body. Ziref continued, his voice indifferent. Eclipse. Hal's heart suddenly jumped. The time gate you passed through. Ziref said in a certain tone. You. Hal was speechless. This black-haired man actually knew his secret. Ziref smiled slightly, as if confirming his guess. Didn't Anna tell you? Or did the magic of the eclipse make you forget? Anna? Do you know her? Hal seemed even more surprised. It seems that you still remember. Ziref's voice was a little soft. So, is Natsu okay? Natsu. Hal didn't react for a while. Take good care of him, he is my brother. Ziref's eyes softened instantly, with deep remembrance and trust in his eyes. Hal was silent. Ziref's words and aura made him feel unbelievable. The black-haired man in front of him made him feel an unprecedented complex emotion. What's your name? Jalal asked. Hal. Hal. Jalal repeated softly, as if savoring the name. You and I are both watched by the god Angsalram, but he seems to like you more. And I, Jalal's voice suddenly became low, have been suffering in the pain of his curse for 400 years. Hal was stunned, digesting the news in his mind. Jalal's eyes suddenly became empty, as if he saw a distant past. He whispered, the time is not right yet, Hal. You are too weak now. When you are stronger, maybe we can really talk about it. What do you mean? Hal frowned, and his doubts deepened. The seal in your body needs stronger magic to be lifted. But by then, I may no longer be able to keep calm. Jalal's eyes revealed a trace of helplessness and pain. Perhaps only you can completely kill me. Kill you? Hal looked at Jalal in disbelief. Jalal lowered his head and said weakly, I don't want to live anymore. 400 years ago, Anna, Igneel and I planned everything, but the uncontrollable eclipse destroyed everything. His tone was filled with deep fatigue and self-mockery. Too long, too long. Jalal slowly raised his head and looked at the sky, as if telling his endless loneliness, now I don't know how long I can stay awake. Jalal suddenly covered his head and begged painfully, please, Hal, kill me, end it all, kill me. Hal was stunned. The black-haired man in front of him was no longer the cold and bloodthirsty black magician in the legend, but a soul that had been cursed and tortured for hundreds of years. He gently grabbed Jalal's helpless hand, feeling the trembling and despair in Jalal's hand. The deep grief and world weariness almost overwhelmed his heart. After decades, someone finally holds my hand again. Jalal's voice was hoarse, and there was a hint of warmth in his eyes. Mavis, do you still remember me? I'm sorry. Suddenly, Jalal's body trembled violently, and the pain in his eyes resurfaced. He pushed Hal away, and the surrounding trees and land began to wither rapidly, and the breath of death spread rapidly. However, just as the power of death swept over, Hal's left hand suddenly began to automatically absorb the dark power, as if dancing with the power of death. Sure enough, my power can't kill you. The curse of the god Angselram has no effect on you, Hal, you are really special. Jalal smiled gently, with an indescribable sense of relief in his smile. If I had met you earlier, maybe we could have become friends. After he finished speaking, his body gradually turned into black mist and dissipated in the wind. Hal stood there blankly, staring blankly at the gradually disappearing Jalal. His heart was filled with confusion and shock. Between heaven and earth, Jalal's voice echoed in the air. Let's go, Hal. He has sensed my power and will come to kill me soon. As a dragon slayer, don't get involved in this disaster. Chapter 96. The next morning, Hal walked back to the camp from the depths of the jungle in a daze. Myra, who had been keeping watch at the camp, saw him and hurried over to him. She saw that Hal was not in a good state at a glance, and asked anxiously, Hal, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? She looked him up and down anxiously, as if looking for any signs of injury. I'm fine. Hal forced a smile, reached out and gently rubbed Myra's hair, feeling a little comforted. However, everything that happened last night still lingered. After Jalal disappeared, an unknown whisper almost swallowed him up, causing him great pain. He knelt on the ground, enduring the incomprehensible voice until the sun rose and the voice gradually weakened, and he finally dragged his tired body back to the camp. Myra carefully helped him into his tent, covered him with a quilt, and whispered, rest for a while. Her tone was soft, but her eyes were full of worry. Outside the tent, the guild members had gathered, all of them looked anxious. Seeing Myra come out, everyone immediately surrounded her and asked impatiently. What happened to Hal? He looks like he's in pain. Urza frowned and asked worriedly. Yes, he's the dragon slayer of the earth. I've never seen him so weak. Laxus was also anxious. Is he hungry? He hasn't eaten since last night. Natsu frowned, as if hunger could explain everything. Happy sighed, although I think what Natsu said makes some sense, I'm afraid it's not just a matter of hunger this time. Happy looked extremely sad, tears kept pouring out. Since Happy was born, Hal has been taking care of him, whether he went to Hal's pond to fish, or when he and Natsu couldn't afford to eat, they wandered to Hal's door, Hal never refused him. In the heart of the cat Happy, Hal is like a big cat at home, an unshakable existence. Now, Hal's weakness and pain made him feel unprecedented helplessness, and the other people in the guild fell silent. Myra stood aside, silently wiping away tears, her heart was also heavy. Just then, Makarov slowly walked over. He had noticed Hal's condition a long time ago, but he didn't know what to do. He saw Hal's painful expression in the tent from a distance, and his heart suddenly hurt. This child he had watched grow up since he was a child, now fell into the deepest despair, and as the guild leader, he was powerless. Hal. He has always been the one who makes me worry the least. Makarov whispered, his voice full of heartache. He is always so mature, so stable, so strong. He has given too much for the guild and this family. But we have given him too little in return. The 89-year-old man said this, his voice was choked, and his sadness made him unstable, and he forced himself to stand firm. When the enemy attacked, he faced the strongest opponent alone. After the enemy retreated, he had to heal my wounds. And now, he is injured and we can't do anything. We don't even know who the enemy is. I am really too incompetent. Hearing Makarov's self-blame, tears welled up in everyone's eyes. Hal's fatigue and pain made everyone realize that they may have always ignored his efforts. In the distance, a white-haired girl sighed softly, and golden magic slowly flowed towards Makarov. Suddenly, a dazzling golden light burst out from Makarov's eyes, and the whole person's momentum stabilized instantly. He felt this golden power in surprise, and a girl's voice came faintly in his mind. He looked intently and found that Hal's body was surrounded by wisps of black breath. What is this? Is it a curse? Makarov muttered to himself involuntarily. Others also noticed this strange power and looked at Makarov with confusion. President, your eyes. Urza couldn't help asking. Everyone looked over and saw a rotating golden magic circle appearing in Makarov's eyes, as if it had life and was constantly running. Maybe I can help Hal. Makarov said in a deep voice. He suddenly shouted, and the golden magic power in his eyes rushed straight to Hal, condensing into a huge golden magic circle above his head, slowly surrounding him, as if expelling some ominous power. Everyone stared at this scene in amazement. Hal's originally painful expression gradually eased, his panting gradually calmed down, and his breathing slowly became stable. President, what's going on? Myra couldn't help asking. Makarov breathed a sigh of relief, his eyes full of gratitude. The first generation is helping us, thank God. He stood up straight and looked at everyone with a firm gaze. Everyone, the S-level exam is temporarily suspended. Focus on Hal and protect him closely. There are still remnants of the demon heart wandering on Sirius Island now. I won't allow anyone to get close to Hal. Yes. President. Everyone responded in unison. Then, everyone took action. Some went to the jungle to patrol and guard, some prepared food, and some cleaned up the remnants of the demon heart that fled deep in the jungle. And Hal in the tent only felt that the black fog around him gradually dissipated, and the warm light shone on him. He completely relaxed his mind and finally fell asleep peacefully. Chapter 97. At noon that day, Hal had not yet woken up, and the atmosphere was tense. Everyone stayed outside his tent, not daring to relax at all. Not long ago, Gray returned to the camp with wounds all over his body and blood all over his body. He was so weak that he could hardly stand and fell to the ground. Obviously, he had just experienced a fierce battle and dust and blood were intertwined on his pale face. Natsu and Urza arrived at the first time and helped him into the tent next to Hal, while Wendy, Xiaolulu, and Juvia took good care of him. Gray's injuries were like needles piercing everyone's hearts, and the tense nerves reminded everyone again. Makarov realized the seriousness of the situation and recalled Laxus and Gildarts who were outside, while he himself went deep into the jungle to hunt down the members of Demon Heart who were still fleeing. His efforts were not in vain, and he finally successfully captured 2 small cotters, a yellow chicken in overalls and a dog-shaped creature in samurai clothes. Both of these guys were once Devil Heart's capable subordinates, but in front of Makarov, they were powerless to fight back and were severely beaten and finally thrown into the sea. A lonely little boat drifted on the distant sea. Altair stood on the boat, gazing at Tenro Island gradually disappearing on the horizon, a wave of helplessness and pain welling up in her heart. During her confrontation with Gray, she finally realized the depth of Ulu's love for her. Alas, past mistakes could not be undone, and she could not deny that she was now a woman mired in sin. In her arms, the pink-haired little girl Melty nestled quietly, and Altair felt a gentle warmth from her body. Melty's forgiveness gave her the strength and courage to live. She didn't know where to go next, but she wanted only to escape from it all and protect the little girl whose future she had destroyed. The boat drifted with the waves, just like her confused heart, with nowhere to go and no idea where the future would go. At noon, the sun was high in the sky, but the atmosphere of Fairy Tale was so heavy that it made people breathless. Makarov walked back from the depths of the jungle alone, with a bit of fatigue in his dragon-like steps. He had cleared the entire jungle, and there were no remnants of the Devil's Heart. And on the beach in the distance, the enemy's warships had quietly evacuated at some point. He looked silently at Hal who was sleeping soundly, and a wave of unspeakable bitterness surged in his heart. For 40 years, his mentor, pricked, has now fallen into the way of magic. He sat on the ground, his eyes showing deep fatigue and sadness. At this moment, Makarov was not one of the 10 great magic guides who shocked the continent, but just an old man who was suffocated by the years and reality. Suddenly, the sky changed, and the dazzling sunlight was instantly swallowed by the dark shadow. Makarov raised his head and saw a huge black shadow falling from the sky. It was a terrifying dragon-shaped creature, with black wings covering the entire sky like the night. The terrifying magic emanating from the dragon's body made him unable to think of fighting. There was only despair. What kind of magic is this? Makarov looked at the huge black shadow in the sky with a numb face. Others also held their breath, looking up at the black shadow in the sky as if they couldn't breathe. That's a dragon. Natsu opened his mouth and said in a hoarse voice. Why would a dragon come to our holy land? Alba also lost her usual arrogant attitude at this moment, sitting on the ground and trembling, pointing at the black dragon and saying. That's the black dragon Acknowledge. Gildarts covered his arm that was cured by Hal, his face gloomy, and a trace of pain in his voice. Even though his wounds were healed by Haldu's magic, his body still ached when he faced the black dragon. The black dragon in the sky looked down at the earth, his sight fell directly on Hal's tent, and said coldly. To become a dragon slayer wizard favored by God, you must die here. What? Everyone was shocked. Makarov's trembling hands became firm in an instant after hearing the black dragon's words, and he clenched his hands fiercely. With a loud shout, his small body suddenly grew larger under the huge golden light, and the giant Makarov rushed forward with unparalleled determination. At the moment when Makarov roared, the black dragon Acknowledge in the sky suddenly swooped down. Its huge body covered the sky and the sun, and its huge dragon wings were like darkness that swallowed the starlight, and the wind it rolled up made the earth tremble. The black dragon swooped down, like a meteorite in the sky dragging a long flame tail, falling to the ground at a high speed. The air was torn apart by its speed, making a deafening roar. The dragon claws stretched forward, sharp its scales reflected a cold light under the starlight, as if it was going to tear everything that blocked it into pieces. Boom! Accompanied by a thunderous roar, the black dragon, like the incarnation of destruction, smashed into the ground with tremendous power. The earth suddenly collapsed, dust flew, and a huge shock wave spread in all directions, as if it was going to tear the whole world apart. Makarov did not flinch. His huge body met the impact of the black dragon. His arms seemed to bear 1,000 pounds of force, holding the opponent's offensive tightly. The huge force made every muscle of his body tremble, and his muscles were as tight as steel. Even so, Makarov still gritted his teeth and persisted, his old eyes were full of determination and anger. I will never allow you to hurt my family. He roared, his voice seemed so weak in the deafening sound of the collision, but it revealed an unyielding will. The black dragon's collision was as violent as a meteorite. The fluctuation of magic power in the air was so intense that it was almost unbearable. The surrounding ground was shattered into pieces, and the mountains collapsed and the ground cracked. On one side was the black dragon with terrifying power like a meteorite. On the other side was the old man with a mortal body. The terrifying power gap gave everyone the answer. President. Old man. The voices of the crowd sounded behind. Ah! Makarov screamed in pain and anger, his body could not stop being crushed, the earth was shattered, and the ground continued to collapse. The terrifying magic collision prevented everyone except the S-class wizard from moving forward. Not good. If the president continues like this, his waist will be broken. Gildarts's face changed drastically. Makarov's movements were too fast, and he was too afraid of the black dragon. He didn't react in the first time. After saying this, Gildarts rushed forward quickly, white magic wrapped around him, crushing all the sand and dust one after another, and rushed forward with unrivaled momentum, and punched the black dragon's head fiercely. Destroy evil and reveal justice. One day. Gildarts shouted, and the terrifying magic power condensed on his right fist, and the crushing power seemed to be able to shatter the sky. Gildarts's punch, with a crushing momentum, landed on the head of the black dragon Acknowledge, accompanied by a deafening roar, and the air around seemed to be distorted by this blow. The white magic was released like a torrent, as if it could tear the earth and the sky apart. However, the black dragon's body only emitted a black light, which easily resolved all of this. Gildart's pupils suddenly contracted, and he could feel that his terrifying crushing magic was ruthlessly rejected by the black dragon. He quickly jumped away, barely avoiding the black dragon's counterattack, and cold sweat oozed from his forehead. What a high resistance to magic! He secretly exclaimed in his heart, looking solemnly at the existence in front of him that seemed like a natural disaster. Fortunately, even if Gildarts's attack did not injure the black dragon, it successfully repelled the black dragon. Makarov's body, which was about to bend, also recovered, barely stood up, and gasped. Makarov recovered his body, knelt on one knee on the ground, and gasped heavily. President! Seeing this, the others quickly surrounded him, protecting Makarov in the middle, staring at the black dragon. Although there was fear in their eyes, they were more determined to protect their families. The black dragon looked down at everyone jokingly and opened its mouth. Poor wizards, hand over the unconscious man, and I will let you go. Hearing this, everyone's heart suddenly shuddered. The voice of the black dragon Akunologist seemed to come from the abyss, low and cold, and creepy. Why did Hal become the target of this terrifying existence? No one knew this. However, at this moment, they had no time to investigate further. The huge pressure made everyone breathless. The sky was completely covered by dark clouds, the originally warm sunshine disappeared without a trace, the temperature around dropped sharply, and a heavy sense of oppression filled the air. The wind began to howl wildly, rolling up the dust and sand on the ground, as if even nature was afraid of the black dragon in front of it. The waves roared in the distance, hitting the reefs, and the splashing water mist danced in the air, bringing a burst of cold wetness. Everyone's heart seemed to be tightly grasped by an invisible hand, and the heavy breath seemed to crush them. However, in the face of this overwhelming terrifying force, no one retreated. Natsu clenched his fists tightly, and flames flickered faintly on his body. Arisa clenched the sword in her hand, her eyes were as firm as steel. Gray, although his wounds had not yet healed, still clenched his teeth, and sweat oozed from his forehead. Myra stood beside Natsu and Urza, her long silver hair flying in the wind. Although her figure seemed gentle, her inner determination was as strong as steel. Tenacity. Gildart's fist trembled slightly, but his eyes were full of determination to fight. Everyone understood that they could not surrender or give in. Their homes, their families, everything, were hanging by a thread at this moment. Although the power of the black dragon could not be matched, their will was as solid as a rock. We refuse! Everyone shouted in unison, the wind violently tore their clothes, the waves roared in the distance, and the pressure of the black dragon was as heavy as a mountain on them, but everyone stood straight. Their eyes burned with firm belief, which was not only the fighting will of fairy tale, but also the determination to protect their families and companions. The black dragon's eyes condensed slightly, as if he felt a little disdain for the resistance of these insignificant humans. The wind was more violent, the sky was like a cracked abyss, and the sense of oppression became stronger, as if the whole world was holding its breath for the impending disaster. However, even so, everyone still stood straight, facing the doomsday-like pressure without flinching. In this oppressive atmosphere, everyone in fairy tale seemed to be fighting against the heaven and earth, supporting a seemingly small but indestructible barrier for Hal. Chapter 98. The black dragon Aknologia hung high in the sky, its huge dragon eyes flashing with cruelty and disdain, as if everything in front of it was just dust. The powerful dragon's might enveloped the earth, and even the air seemed to be trembling. Happy! Natsu was the first to stand up, his voice full of determination, his fists clenched, and flames burning in his palms. He knew that there could be no hesitation at this moment. Happy flapped his wings, and although he was full of fear in his heart, he was still determined. Hey! Hey! He grabbed Natsu and rushed to the sky, facing the behemoth. Gajeel and Wendy looked at Natsu's back, and their hearts were also filled with complex emotions as dragon slayers. They were born for this day. The two looked at each other and rushed into the sky without hesitation. Xiaolulu! Lily! Lily and Xiaolulu led them, and the three dragon slayers rushed towards the black dragon together. In the sky, red, green, and blue magic circles lit up one after another. The roar of the fire dragon. The roar of the iron dragon. The roar of the sky dragon. 3 dazzling rays of light burst out, and the flames, steel, and storms intertwined, as if the heaven and earth were trembling. The 3 dragon-killing forces gathered into a strange magic power, as if tearing the atmosphere apart, and rushed straight to the black dragon. The whole sky seemed to be torn apart at this moment, and the roar echoed like thunder. A huge explosion exploded around the black dragon, and a strong wind was raised, and the shock wave swept out. However, when the smoke dissipated, the black dragon's black scales that seemed to be cast like steel were intact, and his eyes were still cold and ruthless. Natsu's pupils shrank slightly, and he could feel the power of the black dragon, which was far beyond his imagination. Dragon slayers? Are there still so many in this era? The black dragon's voice was low and cold, as if it came from the abyss, with irresistible power. You deserve to die too. Without any warning, the black dragon's huge dragon claws swept down instantly, so fast that people could not react. The three people's eyes flashed with astonishment, and their bodies were enveloped by overwhelming pressure in the next second. As soon as the thought of escaping emerged, they felt the breath of death coming towards them. Oh no! Natsu was shocked, and all his thoughts stopped at this moment. He wanted to move, but found that his body seemed to be locked in place. At the critical moment, a golden lightning fell from the sky, and the thunder and lightning penetrated the darkness. Thunder Dragon's Fang Tianji! Laxus roared, golden lightning wrapped around his body, and his figure rushed to the back of the black dragon with the power of destroying the world like a god of war. Boom! The lightning struck the black dragon's back fiercely, and the powerful impact force exploded instantly, and the exploding lightning seemed to tear the sky and the earth apart. Laxus's attack brought incredible power. His muscles were tense due to the explosion of lightning, and his eyes were full of murderous intent. However, the black dragon only shook slightly, and a flash of lightning flashed on the surface of its huge scales, but it quickly dissipated. He turned around slowly, with a hint of surprise and contempt in his eyes, and his cold pupils locked onto Laxus. Not bad power, but it's far from enough. The black dragon's voice seemed to carry a warning of death, and his eyes were so cold that they made people tremble. Laxus clenched his teeth, and the lightning on his body became more violent. He knew that this was just the beginning, and the real power of the black dragon had not yet fully appeared. At this moment, a roar came from a distance, and then the violent magic suddenly exploded. Satan's soul! Myra's figure fell from the sky, her white hair fluttering, her wings spread out, her demon form was like a demon descending to the world, and she rushed towards the black dragon with overwhelming magic power. Her fists were wrapped in dark energy and hit the black dragon's head directly. Boom! The black dragon's body shook slightly, but the huge dragon head remained stable, without even raising its eyelids. Myra suddenly jumped away, her brows furrowed. She had already attacked with all her strength, but still couldn't shake the black dragon at all. How is it possible? Myra gritted her teeth, and a trace of uneasiness rose in her heart. Her power seemed so insignificant when facing the black dragon. Myra, get out of the way! Urza's voice came from behind. Accompanied by strong magic fluctuations, Urza, wearing armor, rushed from a distance. Her armor flashed golden light in the sun, and the sword in her hand was extremely sharp, exuding a murderous aura. Heavenly wheel blade of chaos! Urza swung the giant sword fiercely, and countless blades of light burst out from her sword tip, transforming into lightning-like sword energy that swept towards the black dragon. Each sword energy seemed to be able to tear the air apart, accompanied by a heart-pounding explosion. He rushed straight to the black dragon's body. However, all this was still like a breeze to the black dragon. The sword blade scraped across his steel-hard scales, making a harsh friction sound, but failed to leave any scars. The black dragon just looked at Urza coldly, with disdain in his eyes. Are the people around the gods blessed just like this? The black dragon slowly opened his huge mouth, and the next second, a strong black energy condensed from his mouth, as if to swallow the world. Oh no! Urza and Myra's faces turned pale at the same time. This power was enough to destroy everything. However, at this critical moment, a familiar voice sounded like a nightmare. Enough! The earth trembled slightly, and the magic in the air suddenly stagnated, as if some invisible force instantly suppressed the black dragon's offensive. Everyone looked in the direction of the sound, and saw a young man in a black robe walking slowly from a distance. His eyes were cold and calm, and he exuded a power that could compete with the black dragon. Har! Natsu whispered in a low voice, his eyes full of disbelief. Har's appearance seemed to have changed the order of heaven and earth. His magic spread like a tide, covering everyone. The black dragon felt a hint of threat, and his eyes instantly became solemn. You are strange, God's favored one. The black dragon whispered, and for the first time there was a hint of fear in his tone. Black dragon acknowledge. Har said coldly, raised his hands gently, and gathered an indescribable huge power. Chapter 99. Hal's awakening undoubtedly boosted the morale of the fairy tale. But now, facing the huge threat of acknowledge, everyone's expressions are still cold and solemn. Natsu keenly sensed the unusual aura on Hal, and his heart was shocked. Hal! Why did you become like this? Hal in front of him was covered with a simple and mysterious black and white robe, and dense runes were wrapped around him, like a being who controls life and death, which made Natsu feel a little scared. However, Hal did not respond to Natsu. His eyes were coldly locked on the black dragon in the air, and the surging magic power in his body gathered together like a storm, magnificent. This power far exceeded any realm he had ever reached, as if the gods came to the earth in person, which made him feel extremely shocked and incredible. God Angselrum! Hal murmured, a trace of confusion flashed in his eyes, but soon, all attention was attracted by the black dragon in the air. Black dragon! Hal's eyes instantly turned black and gold, revealing an irresistible pressure in his eyes, as if possessed by a god. His body was completely dominated by magic power, and his hands suddenly pushed forward, and an extremely terrifying magic shock wave burst out. This magic power turned into a huge black torrent, roaring towards Aknologia. Wherever it passed, the air exploded, and the sea was instantly torn into a deep crack, and the sea water rolled, as if it was going to swallow the entire earth. The sky cracked under the shock of this power, as if the end of the world was coming, and the starry sky was distorted. Aknologia's pupils shrank sharply, and he felt the danger, but it was too late. Hal's magic power was like an invisible giant palm, instantly shattering his indestructible magic barrier. The barrier that once withstood the attacks of countless strong men was as fragile as paper in front of Hal's magic power, and shattered inch by inch. How is it possible? Aknologia roared, and its huge dragon body rolled in the air, trying to get rid of the oppression. But Hal's attack did not stop, and his magic power seemed endless. Each attack carried the power to destroy the world, and it bombarded the black dragon one after another. With the roar of magic power, the earth cracked, and the waves rose high, like a doomsday frenzy. Aknologia's huge dragon body was constantly impacted, the dragon scales broke, and the magic power vibrated wildly in his body. One attack after another seemed endless, and each magic impact was stronger than the previous one, and the power was superimposed layer by layer, as if to completely defeat Aknologia. The black dragon roared like thunder, and its huge dragon body was shaky in the sky. For the first time, the dragon's pupils showed fear and unwillingness. Impossible. I am Aknologia. However, Hal just stretched out his left hand indifferently. The left hand instantly turned into a terrifying black giant hand, like a divine punishment from the sky, with irresistible pressure, easily grasping the giant body of the black dragon. Wait! Aknologia screamed in fear. This was the fear he had never felt in 400 years. The giant hand seemed to be extracting endless vitality from his body. Long Tong stared at Hal, as if he saw some kind of monster that surpassed everything. What kind of power is this? The black dragon's voice trembled, and the original invincible posture had long disappeared at this moment. At this time, Hal did not notice the desperate expression of the black dragon at all. His consciousness gradually blurred, and there seemed to be an even more ancient power in his body calling him. Those unknown whispers before seemed to be magnified 10,000 times at this moment, directly invading his mind. He could not speak, could not break free, and could only let the huge magic power support his body, and his left hand made a hollow grip. God, life and death, reversal, becoming a god, destiny, change. Hal couldn't help but mutter these words, as if they were revelations from the unknown. His voice was hollow and cold, like a puppet controlled by God. The black dragon continued to struggle in the giant hand, and the huge dragon body was drained at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the power was rapidly lost. Just when Aknologia felt completely desperate, suddenly, the whole world seemed to be still. The sea stagnated, the strong wind stopped, and even the struggle of the black dragon froze at this moment. A mysterious power emerged from the void, as if responding to Aknologia's will that was about to dissipate. It did not come from the black dragon itself, but gave him new power and allowed him to breathe. At the same time, Hal's giant hand holding up the sky also disappeared at this moment, as if it had never existed. The huge and suffocating power, with the black dragon disappeared with its breath. The sea calmed down again, and the sky became clear, as if nothing had happened. On the earth, only Hal was still kneeling on the ground, his eyes flashing wildly. His consciousness was hit by countless information, and his brain was in unbearable pain as if it was torn apart. Ah! He groaned in pain, and his magic power quickly drained from his body, and even the strength to stand was gone. Hal! Myra was the first to react and ran to his side. The fairy tale people also rushed to his side and surrounded him. The huge body of the black dragon fell into the sea with a bang, stirring up huge waves. But at this moment, no one noticed this scene, and all eyes were on Hal. His terrifying power endowed by the mysterious power retreated like a tide, but it brought unspeakable weakness and pain. He knelt on the ground, breathing rapidly, and all his magic power disappeared, as if he had just escaped from the brink of death. How could this happen? It seems like the world is saving him. Hal's eyes were full of despair. He knew that the black dragon had been saved. Chapter 100. Makarov was filled with unprecedented confusion at this moment. Hal's godlike power shocked him, but the crisis before him made it impossible for him to think deeply. This was not the time to stop and marvel. He could clearly feel that although the power of the black dragon had weakened, even so, the overwhelming magic power was still something they could not contend with. Be careful! Makarov's voice was low and urgent, and his eyes swept across the battlefield. Laxus and Gildarts beside him were filled with powerful magic, ready to fight at any time. Others also stared at the sea nervously. Makarov and Laxus stared at the front, knowing that the battle was far from over. Boom! Suddenly, the sea surface exploded, and a huge and swift black shadow broke out of the sea, with a terrible impact force, rolling up the sea water all over the sky, like an endless rain hitting the earth. The black dragon is out! Makarov shouted instantly, with an extremely nervous tone. Damn God's favored ones! I will kill all of you! The black dragon roared furiously, and the sound was like thunder. At this moment, the black dragon looked extremely embarrassed, and the entire right dragon claw was like a mummy, drooping weakly. The huge dark magic gathered in his body and gradually condensed into his dragon mouth. The suffocating dark energy was enough to make the whole world tremble. It's a breath! A trace of fear flashed in Gajil's eyes, and he immediately understood the black dragon's intention. It was a power that was enough to destroy everything. Makarov looked at this scene, and deep despair surged in his heart. He knew that he could not stop this disaster at all. It was a terrible force that even the entire Ishgar 4 heavenly kings could not resist. The roar of the black dragon would completely destroy the island, and even more. Everyone also fell into a brief silence and fear. Whether it was Urza, Gajil, or Kana, everyone felt powerless. Such a desperate situation made it almost impossible to breathe. Hal wanted to move, but his body and brain had been exhausted by the magic power before. Cold sweat oozed from his forehead, and his head seemed to explode with pain. He gritted his teeth, stretched out his right hand desperately, and shouted hoarsely, "How can it end here?" But everything was in vain. The roar of the black dragon was about to be completed, and the dark energy that was enough to destroy the entire island was condensing more and more intense. The shadow of death enveloped everyone. At this moment, a resolute hand grabbed Hal's trembling hand. It was Natsu. "Hal, don't give up." Natsu's voice was firm and powerful, and his burning eyes burned with unyielding fighting spirit. In an instant, Laxus also stepped forward. He looked at his grandfather Makarov, with deep concern in his eyes. Makarov looked at his grandson, his eyes moistened, and he felt a familiar power. Once upon a time, he was also like this, leading fairy tale step by step to today. Although they were facing a dark force that could destroy everything, the unyielding faith still burned in their hearts. Everyone held each other's hands without any prior agreement. Urza, Grey, Gajil, Kana, Wendy, all held each other's hands tightly, and the power was transmitted from one person to another, and their hearts were connected. They knew that they could not compete with the black dragon with their own strength, but they were family and companions, and they had an unshakable faith in their hearts. This bond was stronger than magic. Hal's right hand was firmly held by Natsu, and his left hand was tightly held by Myra. At this moment, everyone in Fairy Tale formed an inseparable whole. The fainting whisper in Hal's mind gradually dissipated, as if it was dispelled by this indestructible force. As the whisper disappeared, the piercing pain also quietly retreated. At this moment, his heart became calmer than ever before. However, the roar in the sky that was enough to destroy everything was falling rapidly, and the shadow of death had already shrouded everyone's head. A trace of bitterness flashed in Hal's eyes. He knew in his heart that this blow might mean the end. They could not escape this disaster. "Is it going to die?" he whispered to himself, but a relieved smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. At this moment when he was about to face death, Hal's heart was filled with an inexplicable sense of relief. This is fairy tale. Hal murmured, his eyes filled with memories of the past, filled with warmth and satisfaction. He used to be alone, but now he was held tightly by his companion's hands. Natsu's hand, Myra's hand, and everyone who had been with him. The fighting hand conveys endless power and trust. Facing the overwhelming darkness, he is no longer alone. The roar of the black dragon is like a huge wave from the depths of hell, sweeping down with the momentum of destroying the world, and the magic power bursts out with dazzling light in the sky. At that moment, the world seemed to be torn apart, the entire Tianlang Island shook violently in the endless roar, the earth cracked, and the huge waves swallowed the island. The people of Fairy Tale are tightly connected together, heart to heart, and each other's power is intertwined in despair. But even at this moment of imminent destruction, their bond is still unshakable. Family, live and die together, never separate. The roar of the black dragon echoed between heaven and earth, and the light of magic almost illuminated the entire world. The destroyed world seemed to be completely buried in the long river of history. On December 25, X784, the black dragon Aknologia descended on the holy land of Fairy Tale Tianlang Island. On this day, the Tenro Island disappeared from the surface of the sea. Countless outstanding wizards in the magic world disappeared since then. Makarov Doria, Gildarts Clive, Laxus Doria, Aruza Shuk Lito, Myra Jane Strauss, Natsu Dragneel, and the young wizard who had just emerged, Hal Mikadoa Saint. His legendary story has just begun.